There is a particular silence in a room late at night, a silence made louder by the faint, electronic hum of things left on. Imagine this room. It is clean, modern, filled with the quiet trophies of a successful life. A large screen glows on the wall, and on a table beside a comfortable chair, a phone lays face up, its dark glass periodically flashing with silent notifications, ghosts of a world that never sleeps. A person sits in that chair, bathed in that cool blue light. To any outside observer, this is a picture of peace, of having arrived. But if you could feel what they feel, you would not find peace. You would find a profound and unsettling emptiness, a hollowness that all the comfort and convenience in the world cannot seem to fill. They scroll through images of other lives, other successes, other moments of curated joy, searching for something, though they could not name what it is. This is a prison of our own making, a comfortable cage where the bars are woven from our own desires and distractions. This feeling, this quiet hum of dissatisfaction that runs beneath the surface of our days, is not a personal failure. It is the signature of our time. It is the spiritual exhaustion that comes from living in a world that constantly demands more speed, more efficiency, more connection, more things. We are told that happiness is a destination we can reach if we just work a little harder, buy the right product, or perfect our online image. We have become masters of filling every empty moment with noise, with podcasts, with music, with endless streams of information, because we are terrified of what we might find in the silence. We run from our own inner world, only to find that the anxiety we are fleeing is the one thing that always keeps up. It is the ghost in the machine of our own lives. But what if the solution was not to add more, but to gently take away? What if the path to peace was not about running faster, but about learning to stand still? Thousands of years ago, a young prince found himself in a similar prison. Though his was one of regal splendor, he had every pleasure, every luxury, every distraction the world could offer, and yet he felt that same profound unease. His journey out of that palace was not a search for something new to acquire, but a quest to understand the very nature of his own mind. He sat in silence, not to escape the world, but to see it, and himself, with perfect clarity. This path that he discovered, the wisdom that arose from his stillness, is not a religion that asks for your belief. It is not a set of dogmatic rules. Think of it, instead, as a science of the mind, a practical, compassionate, and timeless methodology for understanding why we suffer and how, through our own efforts, we can find a lasting end to that suffering. It is a gentle invitation not to become someone else, but to finally, truly meet yourself. It begins not with a leap of faith, but with a single, conscious breath. The first step on any journey of healing is a clear and honest diagnosis. Before we can speak of solutions, of peace, or of freedom, we must first look directly and without fear at the condition we wish to address. In the language of this ancient path, that core condition is called dukkha. The most common translation of dukkha is suffering, but this single word is like a shadow that only hints at the shape of the object casting it. It is too heavy, too dramatic. It makes us think of tragedy, of immense pain and despair. While dukkha certainly includes these things, its meaning is far more subtle, more pervasive, and more intimately woven into the fabric of our daily lives. A more accurate feeling for dukkha might be a persistent, underlying sense of unsatisfactoriness. It is a subtle friction, a dis-ease, the feeling that things are just not quite right. It is the gap between the world as we want it to be and the world as it actually is. To truly understand this, we must see it not as a single event, but as an unseen current that flows through our existence in at least three distinct, yet interconnected, ways. The first, and most obvious, form of this current is what we might call the dukkha of ordinary pain. This is the suffering we all know and recognize. It is the sharp, undeniable pain of a migraine headache, the chronic ache in a joint, the sickness that weakens the body. It is the sting of a cruel word, the bitterness of betrayal, the deep, hollow grief that comes with the loss of someone we love. In our modern context, it is the crushing weight of anxiety before a presentation, the gnawing worry over bills we cannot pay, the feeling of burnout after months of relentless pressure. This is the dukkha that announces itself loudly. It is impossible to ignore. Consider the ancient story of a woman named Kisa Gotami. She lived a happy life until her only child, a young son, fell ill and died. Consumed by a grief so powerful it bordered on madness, she refused to accept his death. She clutched his small, lifeless body and went from house to house, from person to person, begging for a medicine that could bring him back to life. People pitied her. They recoiled from her. They thought she had lost her mind. Her suffering was immense, raw, and absolute. This is the face of dukkha that we can all, on some level, understand. It is the pain of life hitting us with its full, unblinking force. It is real, it is valid, and no amount of positive thinking can wish it away. The path of the Buddha does not begin by denying this pain. It begins by acknowledging it, by having the courage to say, "This is here, this hurts." Kisa Gotami, in her desperate search, was embodying this most visceral form of suffering, a pain so great she could not see anything else. But the current of dukkha runs deeper than these overt crises. The second form is more subtle, and in many ways, more relentless. It is the dukkha of change. This is the unsatisfactoriness that arises from the fact that nothing lasts. Even our moments of greatest happiness are subject to this law. Think of a perfect day, a beautiful sunset, the exhilarating feeling of falling in love, the pride of a hard-won achievement. These are wonderful, precious experiences. But woven into the very fabric of that joy is a quiet, often unconscious, knowledge that it is temporary. The sun will set, the vacation will end, feelings will shift, success will fade and be replaced by new challenges. The clinging to these pleasant experiences, the desperate wish to freeze them in time, and the subtle fear of their inevitable passing is itself a form of suffering. It is the reason we obsessively photograph our happiest moments, as if a digital image could somehow stop the flow of time. We are trying to hold on to water in our fists. The more we squeeze, the faster it slips away. This is the bittersweet ache in the heart of joy. It's the slight melancholy that can touch us on a perfect summer afternoon. It is the low-grade anxiety of a person who has finally achieved their goals, only to be haunted by the fear of losing it all. In her search, Kisa Gotami was not only suffering from her loss, she was suffering from her inability to accept the law of change. She was seeking a permanent state of happiness in a world that is defined by its impermanence. She was looking for a medicine to reverse the irreversible, to stop the river from flowing. This struggle against the fundamental nature of reality is a constant source of friction in our lives. We want stability in a universe that is dynamic. We want certainty in a world of flux. This constant, low-level resistance to how things are is a deep and persistent source of our dis-ease. This leads us to the third, and most profound level of dukkha. It is the most subtle, a background hum that is so constant we often fail to even notice it is there. This is the dukkha of conditioned existence itself. It is the inherent unsatisfactoriness of being a self that is constructed from fleeting, interdependent parts. Think about the sheer effort it takes just to be you for a day. We have to maintain a body which gets hungry, tired, and sick. We have to maintain a personality, a set of opinions, a reputation. We are a collection of memories, hopes, fears, and physical sensations, all changing from moment to moment, yet we cling to the idea of a solid, continuous me at the center of it all. This effort, this constant propping up of a fragile identity in a changing world, is tiring. It is a low-grade, foundational stress that is part of being alive. It is the feeling that something is always missing, the vague restlessness that sends us to the refrigerator or to our phones when we are not truly hungry or in need of information. It is the sense of being a spinning top that must keep moving lest it wobble and fall. This is the ultimate diagnosis. The Buddha, a man of profound insight, looked at Kisa Gautami's suffering and understood it completely. He did not offer her a false platitude or a magical cure. He gave her a task. He told her, "There is a medicine, but to make it, I need a handful of mustard seeds. You must bring them to me from a house where no one has ever lost a child, a spouse, a parent, or a friend." Filled with a desperate hope, Kisa Gautami began her quest once more. She went from door to door, and at every house, people were willing to give her the seeds. But when she asked her question, the answer was always the same. "I am sorry," one would say. "The living are few, but the dead are many. Do not remind us of our deepest grief." Another would say, "I lost my husband last year." Another, "My parents are gone." House after house, she heard stories of loss, of change, of the universal pain of existence. As the sun began to set, she sat by the side of the road, watching the lights of the city flicker on and off. The truth finally dawned on her, not as a thought, but as a deep, visceral understanding. Her grief was not hers alone. The current of dukkha, in all its forms, flows through every life. The pain of loss, the pain of change, and the subtle pain of just being were not a curse that had singled her out. They were the very condition of being human. In that moment of profound insight, her frantic, self-absorbed grief dissolved into a vast, compassionate understanding. She understood the first noble truth. She understood dukkha. She returned to the Buddha, not with the mustard seeds, but with a quieted mind, ready to hear what came next. Her story shows us that the first step is not to fight our condition, but to see it with a clarity that is both unflinching and compassionate. To acknowledge this universal current of unsatisfactoriness is not an act of pessimism. It is an act of profound realism and the very beginning of true freedom. For if this current is universal, if it flows through every life, then its source cannot be found in our unique circumstances. It must arise from a dynamic that is common to us all. Our diagnosis is complete. Now, we must look for the cause. If the pervasive sense of unsatisfactoriness, of dukkha, is the fever that runs through our lives, then a wise physician does not stop at simply observing the symptom. They look for the underlying pathogen, the source of the infection. The Buddha, in his role as the great physician of the mind, did exactly this. He looked with unflinching clarity into his own experience and discovered the root cause of this universal fever. He gave it a name that is both simple and profoundly descriptive. Tanha. In English, we might call it craving or desire, but a more visceral translation is thirst. It is a primal, urgent, deep-seated thirst for things to be other than they are. It is not the world outside of us that is the problem. It is this inner mechanism of thirst, this constant reaching, grasping, and clinging of the mind that generates the friction of dukkha. Tanha is the engine that drives the cycle of dissatisfaction, and like a fire, it sustains itself by consuming everything it touches, leaving us feeling emptier than before. This thirst is not a single, simple force. It manifests in three distinct flavors, each one pulling us away from the peace of the present moment. The first, and most easily recognizable, flavor of this thirst is the thirst for sense pleasures. This is kama tanha. It is the relentless desire for pleasing experiences through our five senses and our mind. It is the craving for a delicious taste, a beautiful sight, a pleasant sound, a comforting touch, a fragrant smell, or an interesting thought. This is the engine of our modern consumer culture. It whispers to us from every advertisement, every social media feed, every shop window. It is the sudden, sharp impulse to buy the new gadget you just saw, convinced it will simplify your life. It is the restless scrolling through streaming services, hunting for the perfect movie to distract you. It is the planning of the next exotic vacation before the current one has even ended, always believing that true happiness is located somewhere else, at some future time. This form of thirst operates on a simple, yet flawed, promise. If you can just get, have, or experience this one pleasant thing, your feeling of lack will disappear. But we have all experienced the lie within this promise. Psychologists call it the hedonic treadmill. The pleasure of a new purchase fades. The delicious meal ends, and we are hungry again. The praise we receive at work feels good for a day, and then we need more to feel validated. We adapt to pleasure with incredible speed, and once the novelty wears off, the underlying sense of dukkha returns, often with a renewed intensity. We are left on a treadmill, running faster and faster, chasing a horizon of satisfaction that continuously recedes as we approach it. This endless pursuit of fleeting pleasures, this belief that the next hit will be the one that finally satisfies, is a primary way in which we perpetuate our own dis-ease. We are not just enjoying life's pleasures, we are addictively clinging to them as a solution to a problem they can never solve. The second flavor of thirst is deeper, more subtle, and far more personal. It is the thirst for existence, for becoming. This is bhava-tanha. This is not the desire to have something, but the desire to be someone. It is the profound, instinctual, clinging to life itself, and the desperate need to solidify our sense of self. It is the deep-seated urge to be seen, to be significant, to carve out a permanent and important identity in a world that is fundamentally impermanent. This thirst fuels our ambition, our ego, our need to be right in an argument, our defense of our beliefs and opinions as if they were our very life. It is the force that constructs the story of me, the narrative of our successes and failures, our strengths and weaknesses. A story we then spend our lives defending and promoting. In our time, there is no greater monument to bhava-tanha than the curated world of social media. Our profiles are carefully constructed altars to the self we want to be. Each post, each picture, each life update is a brick in the fortress of our identity. The likes, the comments, the follow counts are the validation this thirsty self craves. A temporary reassurance that I exist, I matter, I am seen. The anxiety of posting something that doesn't get enough engagement is the fear of that self-dissolving, of becoming insignificant. This clinging to a fixed identity is a tremendous source of suffering, because it forces us to live in a state of constant tension, defending a fortress that was only ever made of sand, standing against the natural tides of change and impermanence that define reality. Then there is the third flavor, which at first seems like a contradiction. It is the thirst for non-existence, vibhava tana. This is the desire for annihilation, the urge to escape when our experience becomes painful or unpleasant. When we cannot get the pleasure we crave, or when we are overwhelmed by pain we cannot avoid, the thirst turns on itself. It says, I don't want to feel this. Make it stop. I want out. In its most extreme form, this is the despair that leads to thoughts of self-harm. But it manifests in our lives, in countless, more common ways. It is the impulse to pour a drink after a hard day, not for the taste, but for the numbness. It is the binge-watching of a television series to avoid thinking about a difficult conversation you need to have. It is sleeping the day away to escape from feelings of failure or sadness. It is our obsession with being busy, filling every moment with tasks and distractions, so we do not have to face the uncomfortable silence of our own inner world. This thirst for non-existence is a powerful form of aversion. It is the deep desire to annihilate the present moment simply because it is unpleasant. It is a declaration of war on our own experience, a struggle that only ever leads to more exhaustion and more suffering. Ancient Buddhist cosmology speaks of a realm of beings that serve as a perfect, haunting metaphor for the state of tanha. They are called the pretas, or the hungry ghosts. They are depicted with withered limbs, barely able to support them, and huge, swollen, distended bellies. Their bellies ache with a cavernous emptiness, a gnawing hunger that can never be filled. Yet, their mouths are the size of a pinhole, and their necks are as thin as a needle. No matter how much they try to consume, they can never take in enough to soothe the vast, agonizing emptiness within. They are surrounded by food and water, but when they reach for it, it turns to fire or dust in their hands. This is not a literal place, but a psychological state. When we are in the grip of tanha, we are these hungry ghosts. The constant search for the next pleasure, the next purchase, the next experience is the desperate hunt of the preta. The huge, empty belly is the abyss of the ego, the bhavatana, a sense of self that feels fundamentally lacking and can never be filled from the outside. The pinhole mouth is the hedonic treadmill, the fact that no experience, no matter how wonderful, is ever enough to satisfy the craving for long. The torment and frustration of this state, the suffering that comes from the very act of craving, gives rise to the desire to escape, the thirst for annihilation, vibhavatana. This is the cycle, the vicious loop that keeps us trapped. A feeling of lack or discomfort arises dukkha. The mind, driven by one of the three thirsts, immediately grasps for an external object or an internal escape to fix it. We might get a temporary moment of pleasure or relief, a brief distraction, but because all things are impermanent, that object or experience fades and the relief disappears. The original feeling of lack returns, often even stronger now, because the contrast with the fleeting pleasure makes the emptiness feel more acute. So we begin the hunt again. We are trapped in a feedback loop of our own making, constantly seeking a cure in the very mechanism that causes the disease. The diagnosis is clear. The fever of our lives, the pervasive unsatisfactoriness called dukkha, is caused by a persistent internal thirst called tanha. Having seen the sickness and having identified its cause, a profound and deeply hopeful question can finally be asked. If this thirst can be understood, Can it also be released? Is there a way to step off this treadmill? Is there a path that leads out of the realm of the hungry ghosts? After the clear diagnosis of the universal condition of dukkha and the identification of its root cause as the insatiable thirst of tanha, it is easy to fall into a state of despair. One might think, if this unsatisfactoriness is so fundamental, and if this thirst is so deeply ingrained, then what hope is there? Is this simply a cruel cosmic joke? A life sentence of running on a treadmill in a locked room? It is precisely at this point that the wisdom of this path reveals its profound and radical optimism. The Buddha did not stop at being a pathologist, merely identifying the disease. He was, above all, a physician, a healer. Having diagnosed the illness and its cause, he then laid out a complete, practical, and deeply compassionate framework for healing. This framework is known as the Four Noble Truths. These are not commandments to be believed, or dogmas to be accepted on faith. They are four facts, four realities, presented with the same logical clarity and pragmatism as a master physician consulting with a patient. They are a declaration that we are not helpless, and that a cure is not only possible, but achievable through our own efforts. The first noble truth is simply the one we have already explored. It is the courageous and honest acknowledgement. There is suffering. The physician looks at the patient and says, "Yes, you have a fever. The discomfort you feel is real." This is an act of profound validation. It tells us that the stress, the anxiety, the feeling of being unfulfilled, the pain of loss, and the subtle friction of daily life are not signs that we are broken or flawed. They are not a personal failure. They are a shared universal condition of unenlightened existence. A doctor who denies the existence of an illness out of a misguided attempt to be positive is not a compassionate doctor. True compassion begins with looking directly at what is true, without flinching. This first truth invites us to stop fighting with our experience, to stop pretending everything is fine when it is not, and to simply acknowledge the reality of the situation. In this simple act of seeing, the process of healing has already begun. The second noble truth follows with impeccable logic. There is an origin, a cause of this suffering. The physician, having confirmed the fever, now identifies the virus. As we have seen, this cause is tanha, the internal thirst for things to be different. This is perhaps the most empowering of all the truths, because of where it locates the problem. It does not say that suffering is caused by other people. It does not say it is caused by society, by the government, by fate, or by the gods. If the cause of our suffering were external, we would be perpetual victims, forever at the mercy of forces beyond our control. But the Buddha declared something revolutionary. The primary cause of our disease lies within the patterns of our own mind. This is not a statement of blame. It is a statement of power. It's not saying, "It's all your fault." It's saying, "The key is in your hand." Because the cause is internal, the solution must also be internal. The power to change our experience does not depend on changing the world outside, but on understanding and transforming the world within. This is where the famous parable of the poisoned arrow becomes so vital. The Buddha told of a man who was shot by an arrow dipped in a deadly poison. His friends and family rush to his side, bringing a surgeon to remove it. But the man refuses their help. He says, "I will not have this arrow removed until I know the name and clan of the man who shot me. I must know whether he was tall or short, from which village he came. I will not be treated until I know what kind of wood the arrow is made from, what kind of bird the feathers belong to, and what the precise ingredients of the poison are." The Buddha asks his listeners a simple question: What will happen to this man? The answer is obvious. He will die. While he is lost in his metaphysical and forensic speculations, the poison will do its work. He is asking questions that have no bearing on the urgent matter at hand, his own survival. We are all, in some way, this man. We are struck by the arrow of dukkha, and we spend our lives asking, why me? What is the ultimate meaning of suffering? Was it something I did in a past life? Is there a God who is testing me? We get lost in a forest of unanswerable questions, all while the poison of craving, of tanha, continues to spread through our system. The Four Noble Truths are the Buddha's way of being that surgeon. He is saying, the immediate task is to pull out the arrow. The immediate task is to treat the wound. Your conceptual questions are secondary to the raw, immediate reality of your own suffering and its potential cure. This framework is intensely practical. It is concerned not with speculation, but with liberation. This leads us to the third noble truth, the physician's prognosis, which shines like a beacon of hope. There is a cessation of this suffering. This is the radical and life-altering promise that the illness is curable, the fever can break, the thirst can be quenched. This state of cessation is known as nirodha, and its experiential reality is called nirvana. Here we must be very careful, for the word nirvana has been buried under layers of misunderstanding. It is not a heaven in the clouds, not a paradise you go to after you die. The word itself means to extinguish, or to blow out, like blowing out a candle flame. What is extinguished? The fires of tanha, the fires of greed, of hatred, and of ignorance that fuel the engine of dukkha. It is the end of the inner friction. It is a state of unshakable peace, profound mental freedom, and radiant clarity that is attainable right here in this very life. It is not the annihilation of you, but the annihilation of the cage of craving that has imprisoned you. It is the mind returning to its natural state of luminous, peaceful awareness. This third truth is the most profound encouragement. It tells us that the path is not a path to nowhere. There is a destination, a state of complete healing, and it is within our reach. And finally, if the third truth is the promise of a cure, the fourth noble truth is the prescription itself. There is a path of practice that leads to the cessation of suffering. The great physician does not merely say, "You can be well." He hands us the medicine, the exercises, the entire therapeutic regimen that will lead to a full recovery. This path is the Noble Eightfold Path. It is a comprehensive blueprint for human flourishing, a set of 8 interconnected practices that work together to transform our entire being. It is not a random collection of rules, but a holistic and gradual training of the mind and heart. This path is traditionally divided into 3 sections. The first is the cultivation of wisdom, which includes right view and right intention. This is about sharpening our perception to see reality as it is and aligning our heart with compassion and clarity. The second is the cultivation of ethical conduct, which includes right speech, right action, and right livelihood. This is about learning to live and act in the world in ways that cause no harm to ourselves or others, creating an outer life that supports our inner peace. The third is the cultivation of mental discipline, which includes right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. This is the direct training of the mind, learning to calm its frantic energy, to focus its power, and to develop the stable, clear awareness necessary for deep insight. These 4 noble truths, taken together, form a perfect and complete structure. The first truth sees the problem, the second understands its cause, the third envisions its solution, and the fourth provides the practical means to get there. There is nothing missing. It is a framework that moves us from being a passive victim of our circumstances to the empowered architect of our own liberation. We have been given the doctor's diagnosis, the cause of the illness, the hope of a full recovery, and the detailed prescription for the cure. We have been given the map. The rest of the journey is about learning to read it, and then having the courage to take the first step upon the path it reveals. That path begins with the foundation of all else, learning to see the world and ourselves in a new light. Once the physician has presented the diagnosis and the promise of a cure, the journey of healing begins. The Noble Eightfold Path is not a set of steps to be followed in a rigid, linear order, but a collection of 8 interwoven strands that, together, create a fabric of deep and lasting well-being. And the very first strand, the one that informs all the others, is called Samaditthi, or right view. It comes first for a simple and profound reason. Everything we do, everything we feel, and everything we think flows from the way we see the world. If our map of reality is distorted, if the lens through which we look is smudged with misunderstanding, then no matter how much effort we exert, we will remain lost. Right view is the process of cleaning that lens. It is not about adopting a new set of beliefs or converting to a new faith. The path of the Buddha is not concerned with belief, but with seeing. Right view is a courageous commitment to see things, not as we wish they were, or as we have been told they are, but as they truly are. It is the foundation upon which the entire structure of liberation is built, and it rests upon 3 great pillars of understanding: the law of cause and effect, the truth of impermanence, and the liberating insight of no self. The first pillar of right view is a clear understanding of what is known as karma. In the West, this word is often misunderstood as a system of cosmic punishment and reward, a simplistic idea that if you do something bad will happen to you. But the original meaning is far more subtle and scientific. The word karma simply means action, and the law of karma is the natural law of cause and effect as it applies to our intentional actions. It states that every willed action, every action of body, speech, and mind that is driven by an intention is a seed that we plant, and like any seed, it will, in time, bear a fruit of a similar nature. Actions motivated by the inner poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion are unskillful seeds. They will inevitably ripen into experiences of suffering, conflict, and confusion for ourselves and for others. Conversely, actions motivated by generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom are skillful seeds. They will ripen into experiences of peace, connection, and happiness. This is not a judgment handed down by an external being. It is a law of nature, as impersonal and reliable as gravity. If you release an apple from your hand, it falls to the ground. That is gravity. If you speak a word of anger to a loved one, you introduce a vibration of discord into the relationship and into your own heart. That is karma. If you perform an act of anonymous kindness, you cultivate a spacious and joyful state within your own mind. That too is karma. The most crucial part of this law is that the primary determinant of the fruit is the intention, the quality of mind behind the action. This understanding is profoundly empowering. It lifts us from the state of being a passive victim of fate and places us in the position of being the active creator of our experience. It tells us that while we cannot always control what happens to us, we have complete power over how we choose to respond. Every moment becomes an opportunity to plant a skillful seed. With every thought, word, and deed, We are shaping the person we are becoming and the world we will inhabit. Seeing this clearly is the first step in taking radical responsibility for our own well-being. The second pillar of right view is the direct, unadorned perception of anicca, or impermanence. This is perhaps the most obvious, yet most resisted, truth of our existence. Nothing is static. Everything is in a state of flux. On a gross level, we see this everywhere. The seasons turn, our bodies age, relationships begin and end, fortunes are made and lost, civilizations rise and fall. The world is a relentless river of change. But impermanence also operates on a much more subtle and intimate level. Your mood right now is not what it was an hour ago. The thoughts you are thinking are a fleeting cascade, appearing and disappearing in your awareness. Even your physical body, which feels so solid, is a community of trillions of cells that are constantly dying and being replaced. You are not the same person, physically or mentally, that you were 7 years ago, or even 7 minutes ago. The suffering related to impermanence does not come from the fact of change itself. Change is neutral. The suffering comes from our resistance to it. Our mind, driven by that thirst of tanha, tries to do the impossible. It tries to grasp onto pleasant experiences and make them permanent. And it tries to push away unpleasant experiences and banish them forever. It is like trying to build a permanent fortress out of sand at the edge of a rising tide. It is a futile, exhausting struggle against the fundamental nature of reality. Right view is the wisdom to stop fighting this battle. It is the understanding that life is a flow, and that peace comes not from trying to dam the river, but from learning to navigate its currents. When we truly accept impermanence, we begin to hold our joys more lightly and our sorrows more gently. We can savor the beauty of a flower without being crushed by the knowledge that it will wilt, because its fleetingness is part of its beauty. We can endure a period of pain with more patience, knowing that it too will pass. Embracing impermanence doesn't lead to indifference. It leads to a profound appreciation for the precious, unrepeatable gift of each present moment. The third pillar of right view is the deepest, most challenging, and ultimately the most liberating insight. It is the understanding of anatta, or no self. Our entire life is built around the assumption of a solid, continuous, and independent me at the center of our experience. We think of it as a CEO in the headquarters of our head, a permanent soul, a little person behind the eyes who is the thinker of thoughts, the feeler of feelings, and the director of our actions. The doctrine of anatta invites us to look for this self. Where is it? There is a famous dialogue between the Greek king Melinda and the Buddhist sage Nagasena. The king arrives in a chariot, and Nagasena uses it as a teaching tool. He asks the king, "Your Majesty, what is this chariot you arrived in? Is it the wheels? Is it the axle? Is it the reins? The frame? The yoke?" The king answers no to each question. Nagasena then concludes that chariot is simply a convenient name, a concept we apply to a collection of parts, assembled and functioning in a particular way. There is no independent chariot essence that exists apart from its components. Nagasena then turns the analogy upon himself. He asks, "In the same way, what is Nagasena? Is it my body? Is it my feelings? Is it my perceptions, my mental formations, my consciousness?" The investigation reveals that this self we cling to is just like the chariot. It is a temporary assemblage of physical and mental processes, constantly changing, constantly in flux. Self is a useful convention for navigating the world, but there is no permanent, unchanging entity to be found. It is a process, not a thing, a verb, not a noun. This is not a nihilistic declaration that you do not exist. You are clearly here, reading these words, having this experience. Rather, it is saying that the idea of a separate, solid, and permanent self is an illusion, a trick of the mind. And this illusion is the root of so much of our suffering. It is this illusory self that feels insulted, this self that is terrified of dying, this self that is consumed by greed, jealousy, and pride. When we see through this illusion, the whole structure of our anxiety begins to crumble. If there is no fixed self to defend, who is there to feel offended? If there is no permanent self to aggrandize, what is the point of endless, ego-driven striving? The insight of anatta doesn't destroy us, it liberates us. It loosens the tight, anxious knot of self-obsession and allows us to experience a more spacious, connected, and compassionate way of being. Together, these three insights, karma, anicca, and anatta, form the clear lens of right view. Understanding karma gives us the power and responsibility to shape our lives. Understanding impermanence frees us from the futile struggle of clinging and aversion. And understanding no self liberates us from the prison of the ego. This is not a view to be adopted in a single moment, but a perspective to be cultivated over time, with patience and honest investigation. It is a continuous turning of the mind away from delusion and toward reality. And as this new, clearer view of the landscape begins to stabilize, it naturally and powerfully begins to influence the direction we choose to walk. It sets the compass for our heart. If right view is the act of cleaning the lens of our perception to see the world clearly, then right intention is the conscious act of deciding where to point that lens. It is the rudder of the ship, the compass for the heart. A clear view of the landscape is essential, but without a wholesome destination in mind, we can still drift aimlessly, or, even worse, use our clarity for unskillful ends. Right intention, or sammasankappa, is the second step on the Eightfold Path, and it flows directly from the first. Once we begin to see the reality of cause and effect, the truth of impermanence, and the illusion of a separate self, our inner motivations naturally begin to shift. We start to distinguish between the intentions that lead to more entanglement, stress, and suffering, and those that lead to freedom, peace, and clarity. Right intention is the practice of consciously aligning our will with the latter. It is about purifying the why behind every what that we do. It is not so much a single action as it is the very flavor and texture of our mind, the subtle energy that precedes our thoughts, words, and deeds. This wholesome orientation of the heart is cultivated through three interconnected intentions: the intention of renunciation, the intention of loving kindness, and the intention of harmlessness. The first of these, the intention of renunciation, is perhaps the most misunderstood. The word renunciation can conjure images of harsh self-denial, of turning one's back on the world and all its joys. But in this context, its meaning is far more gentle and liberating. It is not about giving up, but about letting go. It is not a renunciation of the world, but a renunciation of the frantic, obsessive clinging to the world. Through right view, we begin to see clearly that our relentless pursuit of sense pleasures, wealth, status, and validation, the thirst of tanhais, a source of profound and constant stress. The intention of renunciation, or nekama, is the wise and gentle turning away from this exhausting game. It is the recognition that true wealth is not having more, but wanting less. It is the conscious choice of simplicity over complexity, of contentment over constant striving. This is not a call to abandon our homes and live in a cave. It is an internal shift in values. It can be as simple as the intention to spend an evening in quiet reflection instead of distracting oneself with entertainment. It can be the decision to declutter our living space, recognizing that a cluttered environment often reflects a cluttered mind. It is the intention to find joy in a simple walk in nature, rather than seeking it in an expensive purchase. Each time we consciously choose not to indulge a craving, not because we are forcing ourselves, but because we see that indulging it will not lead to lasting happiness. We are cultivating the intention of renunciation. We are letting go of a rope that was burning our hands. It is a movement away from the bondage of more and towards the profound freedom and spaciousness of enough. It is the heart's quiet sigh of relief. The second orientation of a purified heart is the intention of loving kindness, or avyapada. This is the direct antidote to the poison of ill will, anger, resentment, and hatred. It is the active, sincere wish for all beings, without exception, to be happy and well. It is a radical shift from a mind that is preoccupied with its own grievances to a mind that is filled with a boundless and unconditional goodwill. This intention, crucially, must begin with ourselves. It is immensely difficult to radiate genuine warmth to others if our own inner world is a landscape of harsh self-criticism and judgment. Therefore, we begin by cultivating an intention of kindness towards our own struggles, our own imperfections, our own pain. We learn to hold ourselves with the same tenderness we might offer a dear friend. From this foundation of self-compassion, the intention naturally expands outwards. We direct it towards our loved ones, consciously wishing for their happiness. Then, we extend it to neutral people, the strangers we pass on the street or the clerk at the grocery store. Finally, and most powerfully, we practice extending this intention of loving kindness even to those we find difficult, those who have hurt or angered us. This does not mean we must condone their actions or even like them. It simply means we recognize that they, too, are suffering, and we hold the fundamental wish for them to be free from the inner poisons that cause them to act in harmful ways. Cultivating this intention transforms the very climate of our mind. A mind colored by ill will is tight, contracted, bitter, and heavy. A mind suffused with loving kindness is spacious, soft, bright, and resilient. It is a choice we make, again and again, about the kind of inner world we want to inhabit. The third facet of right intention is that of harmlessness, or avihimsa. This is the compassionate resolve to abstain from causing harm to any living being. It is the practical application of loving kindness. While loving kindness is the wish for others to be well, harmlessness is the active commitment to not be the cause of their suffering. This intention of non-violence extends far beyond the obvious physical act of killing. It is a deep sensitivity to the interconnectedness of all life. It includes abstaining from harsh and abusive speech that wounds another's heart. It includes refraining from malicious thoughts of ill will that poison our own mind before they ever affect anyone else. In a modern context, it inspires us to consider the harm our consumption habits might cause to other beings or to the environment. It asks us to pause and consider the ripples that will spread out from our actions. Will this word bring more peace or more conflict into the world? Will this action lead to more suffering or less? The story of the feared murderer Angulimala is perhaps the most powerful testament to the transformative power of intention ever told. Angulimala, whose name meant finger garland for the gruesome necklace he wore, was terrorizing a kingdom. His mind was completely consumed by the intention of violence and hatred. He was the very embodiment of ill will and harmfulness. The Buddha, knowing this, calmly walked towards the forest where Angulimala lived. Angulimala saw him and was astonished. Everyone fled from him. Yet this monk was walking directly towards him. He began to run after the Buddha, but though he ran as fast as he could not catch up to the Buddha, who was just walking calmly. Exhausted and confused, Angulimala shouted, "Stop! Monk, stop!" The Buddha, still walking, replied, "I have stopped, Angulimala. It is you who have not stopped." These words struck Angulimala like lightning. He understood at once that the Buddha was not talking about physical movement. The Buddha had stopped generating the karma of violence and hatred. He was at peace. Angulimala, on the other hand, was still running, trapped on the endless treadmill of his own violent intentions. In that moment of profound insight, his life's motivation shattered. The intention of violence that had driven him for so long collapsed, and in its place arose a powerful and desperate intention for peace, for an end to his own torment. He threw down his weapons and bowed at the Buddha's feet. He would go on to become a monk, and through immense effort, he purified his mind, eventually becoming a revered saint. The story of Angulimala is the ultimate proof that our past actions do not define our future. It is the intention we hold in the present moment that holds the key to our transformation. No one is beyond hope, because the heart's intention can always be changed. Together, these three intentions of renunciation, of loving kindness, and of harmlessness form the compass that guides us on the path. They are a constant, gentle pressure, steering us away from the rocky shores of greed, hatred, and cruelty, and towards the open ocean of freedom, compassion, and peace. Right view gives us the map, showing us the terrain of reality, but right intention sets our destination. It is the quiet, powerful resolve in the heart that says, "May I move towards simplicity. May I be a source of warmth. May I cause no harm." When our sight is clear and our heart's compass is true, this inner alignment will inevitably seek an outer expression. The first, most constant, and most powerful of these expressions is found in the very words we choose to speak. With our view of reality clarified and the compass of our heart set towards a wholesome direction, the eightfold path moves from the inner world of perception and intention to the outer world of expression. The first, most immediate, and most powerful way our inner state manifests is through our speech. The words we use are not mere sounds, they are creative forces. With words, we build bridges of connection or dig trenches of separation. With words, we soothe a wounded spirit or inflict a wound that can last a lifetime. Our personal reality and the reality of our shared world is woven thread by thread from the stories we tell, the conversations we have, and the inner dialogue that runs ceaselessly through our minds. Right speech, or samavaka, is therefore not a minor point of etiquette. It is a profound spiritual discipline. It is the art of using this immense power skillfully, consciously, and compassionately. It is not a list of prohibitions designed to restrict us, but rather a set of guidelines for liberating ourselves and others from the suffering caused by unconscious and unskillful communication. When our view is clear and our intention is pure, our speech naturally begins to change. It becomes an instrument of truth, a vessel for kindness, and a source of peace. This discipline unfolds through the practice of abstaining from 4 specific types of harmful speech: false speech, slanderous speech, harsh speech, and idle chatter. By understanding and working with each of these, we transform our voice from a source of noise into the sound of awakening. The first discipline, abstaining from false speech, is the very foundation of integrity and trust. On the surface, this seems simple. Don't tell lies. But the practice goes far deeper than avoiding outright falsehoods. It invites us to examine the myriad subtle ways we bend and distort the truth to serve our own ego. There is the lie of exaggeration, where we inflate our achievements or embellish a story to make ourselves seem more witty, more important, or more victimized. We add a little spice to the narrative to capture attention, subtly sacrificing truth for the sake of entertainment or self-aggrandizement. Then there is its opposite, the lie of minimization, where we downplay our role in a conflict, omit details that cast us in a poor light, or diminish the harm that our actions have caused. It is the "it was no big deal" that dismisses another person's valid pain. Perhaps most common is deception by omission, the careful curation of facts to present a picture that is technically true but fundamentally misleading. We tell part of the story, the part that suits us, and leave the rest in shadow. This exploration naturally leads us to the thorny issue of so-called white lies, those small falsehoods we tell supposedly to protect another person's feelings. Here, the wisdom of this path offers a beautiful and practical filter, often expressed as 3 questions we should ask ourselves before speaking. Is it true? Is it beneficial? Is it the right time? A statement might be true, but if it is not beneficial and the timing is wrong, speaking it might be unskillful. For example, bluntly telling someone a new haircut is unflattering might be true in our opinion, but it is rarely beneficial and serves only to cause hurt. In this case, silence is the kinder, wiser choice. Conversely, a lie might seem beneficial in the short termies. That report you wrote is perfect to avoid a difficult conversation, but it ultimately causes more harm by preventing growth and fostering a culture of dishonesty. The practice of right speech asks for a higher form of intelligence and compassion. It is the commitment to speak what is true and beneficial, at a time and in a way that the other person can hear it. The inner consequence of failing in this discipline is a kind of spiritual corrosion. Every lie, no matter how small, creates a fissure in our own integrity. It creates a dissonance between our inner knowing and our outer presentation, a state of internal conflict that generates anxiety and erodes self-respect. We become strangers to ourselves. The outer consequence is the breakdown of the most precious human currency, trust. Trust is the bedrock of all meaningful relationships, families, and communities. False speech is a poison that slowly contaminates this wellspring, creating a world of suspicion, isolation, and loneliness. To commit to truthful speech is to commit to building a world, both internal and external, founded on the solid rock of reality. The second discipline is to abstain from slanderous or divisive speech. This is the practice of weaving harmony rather than discord. Slander, at its most extreme, is the malicious spreading of falsehoods to destroy another's reputation. But its more common form is far more insidious and woven deeply into our social fabric. It is the habit of gossip. We sit with friends or colleagues and find a strange, fleeting pleasure in discussing the faults, failures, and misfortunes of those who are not present. Why is this so addictive? Often, it is a misguided strategy to feel better about ourselves by focusing on the perceived flaws of others. It can be a way to bond with a group, creating a false sense of intimacy through a shared enemy or a shared sense of superiority. It is the act of carrying tales, hearing a negative story from one person and rushing to repeat it to another, planting seeds of mistrust and conflict along the way. This kind of speech is a toxin. It creates an atmosphere of fear, where people feel they cannot be authentic for fear of being talked about later. It reduces complex human beings to one-dimensional caricatures and fuels the fires of factionalism and us versus them thinking. The practice here is not just to refrain from participating in such talk, but to become a force for reconciliation. When we are in a conversation that turns to gossip, we can gently try to redirect it, or introduce a different perspective, or speak of the person's good qualities. The highest practice is to actively use our speech to heal rifts, to foster understanding between people in conflict, and to build community. We can make a quiet vow to ourselves. May my words be a balm, not a blade. May my speech be a bridge that connects hearts, not a wedge that drives them apart. When we feel the impulse to gossip arise, we can use it as a moment of mindfulness, pausing to ask, what is the intention in my heart right now? Am I seeking to connect or to divide? Am I trying to help or to harm? In this way, even the temptation to speak unskillfully becomes a valuable part of the path. The third discipline is to abstain from harsh speech. While slander poisons relationships from a distance, harsh speech is a direct act of verbal violence. It is the use of words as a weapon. Again, this exists on a spectrum. At its most obvious, it is shouting, cursing, and name-calling words intended to intimidate and wound. But the territory of harsh speech is vast and includes many more subtle aggressions. It is the biting sarcasm that masquerades as humor but is designed to belittle. It is the cold, cynical remark that dismisses another's enthusiasm. It is the intellectually sharp comment that is emotionally cruel, used to prove a point at the cost of another's dignity. It also includes the slower, grinding forms of verbal abuse, the constant nagging, the relentless complaining, the whining tone of voice that wears down the peace of a household. It is the language of blame and accusation that puts others on the defensive and makes authentic communication impossible. The antidote is the cultivation of kind and gentle speech. This does not mean becoming saccharine, insincere, or unable to speak difficult truths. It means learning the skill of speaking in a way that is, as the Buddha described, pleasing to the ear, affectionate, that goes to the heart, is courteous. It is possible to offer criticism that is constructive and supportive. It is possible to set a boundary that is firm but not aggressive. It is possible to disagree without being disagreeable. The tone of our voice, the softness of our words, and the intention of kindness behind them make all the difference. This practice also forces us to look inward. Harsh speech is almost always a symptom of our own inner pain. We lash out when we feel threatened, frightened, frustrated, or powerless. The impulse to speak harshly can thus become a valuable alarm bell, signaling that we need to attend to our own suffering. Instead of projecting our pain onto someone else through our words, we can learn to pause, breathe, and offer some kindness to the part of ourselves that is hurting. By healing our own inner world, our outer speech naturally becomes more gentle. The fourth and final discipline of right speech is to abstain from idle chatter. This is perhaps the most challenging practice in our modern world, which is drowning in a deluge of pointless information. Idle chatter is the endless stream of meaningless talk, aimless speculation, and verbal filler that we use to avoid the perceived discomfort of silence. It is conversation that goes nowhere, serves no purpose, and simply scatters our precious mental energy. It is the nattering about celebrities, the rehashing of old dramas, the endless commentary on things we cannot control, the sharing of opinions on subjects we know little about. Our social media feeds are vast, algorithmic engines of idle chatter, designed to keep our attention hooked with a stream of trivialities. This constant exposure to noise creates a restless, agitated mind. We lose the ability to concentrate, to think deeply, and to be truly present with ourselves and with each other. The practice here is twofold. First, it is the conscious decision to curate our information diet, to unplug from the endless noise and create pockets of quiet in our day. Second, it is the cultivation of noble silence. This is not an awkward, empty silence. It is a rich, generative, and peaceful state. It is the silence in which we can finally hear our own heart. It is the silence that allows for deep and compassionate listening to another person, without immediately formulating our own response. It is the fertile ground from which real wisdom can sprout. There is a beautiful Zen story that perfectly illustrates this principle. An old farmer had a wise Zen master living next to him. One day, the farmer's only horse ran away. His neighbors came to console him, saying, "What terrible luck." The master simply replied, "Maybe." The next week, the horse returned, bringing with it a herd of wild horses. The neighbors came to celebrate, exclaiming, "What wonderful luck!" The master said only, "Maybe." The following week, the farmer's son was trying to tame one of the wild horses when he was thrown and broke his leg. The neighbors came to offer their sympathy. "What awful luck!" they cried. The master replied, "Maybe." A few weeks later, the army came to the village, conscripting all able-bodied young men for a war in which most would surely die. Because the farmer's son had a broken leg, he was left behind. The neighbors came in awe. "What incredible luck," they said. The master, looking at the unfolding of life with a deep and quiet mind, simply replied, "Maybe." The master's speech was not idle. He did not engage in the neighbor's endless cycle of speculation, praise, and blame. His words and his silence came from a place of deep peace that understood the vast, unpredictable nature of life. He was not caught in the story. This is the power of noble silence. The practical guideline is to learn to bring our speech through two gates before we let it out into the world. The first gate is it true? The second is it beneficial? If we cannot answer yes to both, then noble silence is often the most skillful and compassionate response. These four disciplines, practiced together, completely reorient our relationship with communication. We move from being unconscious broadcasters of our inner turmoil to being skillful artists of connection and peace. It is a path that requires constant mindfulness, patience, and a deep well of kindness for ourselves and others. Right speech is not about being perfect. It is about being aware. It is the sound of a mind that is waking up. And when our words have become so aligned with truth and kindness, when our voice has become an instrument of harmony, our physical actions will inevitably begin to resonate with this same profound integrity, leading us to the next essential strand of the path. As the clarity of right view illuminates our mind, and the compassion of right intention sets the direction of our heart, the path naturally moves into the domain of our physical presence in the world. Our words shape our reality, but our actions give it weight and substance. Right action, or sammakamanta, is the discipline of aligning our bodily actions with our deepest wisdom and compassion. It is the art of moving through the world in a way that embodies peace, integrity, and harmlessness. This is not a set of rigid commandments imposed by an external authority, but rather the graceful, natural, and ethical conduct that flows from a mind that is no longer at war with itself or the world. When we see clearly the interconnectedness of all beings, and when our heart genuinely wishes for their well-being, our actions spontaneously begin to reflect this understanding. The body ceases to be an instrument of the ego's blind cravings and aversions, and becomes instead an instrument of peace. The Buddha distilled this profound practice into 3 fundamental guidelines, 3 vows that provide a clear and practical framework for living a life of harmless integrity: to abstain from taking life, to abstain from taking what is not given, and to abstain from sexual misconduct. The first of these, the vow to abstain from taking life, is the most fundamental expression of a compassionate heart. It is a commitment to cherish and protect life in all its forms, recognizing that every sentient being, from the most complex human to the simplest insect, shares a common desire to live and to avoid pain. This precept, at its core, is about cultivating a profound reverence for the intricate web of existence. In its most obvious sense, it is a vow not to kill or intentionally harm other humans. But its spirit extends far beyond this. It encourages a mindful and gentle presence in the world. It might express itself in the care we take while driving, conscious of the pedestrians, cyclists, and other drivers who share the road. It might inform our choices as consumers, leading us to consider the welfare of the animals and the impact on the ecosystems that are affected by the products we buy. It is an active commitment to be a protector, not a destroyer. There is a timeless Zen story that captures the unconditional nature of this practice. A master was walking by a river and saw a scorpion struggling in the water, about to drown. He carefully reached down, scooped up the scorpion, and placed it on the riverbank. As he did so, the scorpion stung his hand. A moment later, a gust of wind blew the scorpion back into the water. Again, the master patiently and gently rescued it. And again, the scorpion stung him. A man who was watching, perplexed, asked the master, "Why do you keep saving that creature? It is its nature to sting you." The master looked at his swollen hand and replied softly, "It is the nature of the scorpion to sting. It is my nature to save." This beautiful story illustrates the heart of right action. The master's action was not conditional on the scorpion's gratitude or behavior. It was not a transaction. It was a pure, unconditional expression of his own cultivated nature of compassion and harmlessness. Right action, in this sense, liberates us from being merely reactive to the world. We no longer act out of anger when we are attacked, or out of fear when we are threatened. Instead, we learn to act from a stable, internal center of peace and integrity. Regardless of the outer circumstances, we act not to get a certain result, but because the action itself is a true and beautiful expression of who we are choosing to be. The second precept, to abstain from taking what is not given, is the foundation of trust and social harmony. In simple terms, it means not stealing. It is a respect for the property and resources of others, creating a society where people can feel secure. But like all these precepts, its application in our complex modern world is subtle and far-reaching. Taking what is not given extends beyond the physical act of theft. It includes taking intellectual property through plagiarism or digital piracy. It can mean taking advantage of a system's loopholes for personal gain, knowing that it creates a loss for the collective. In a work environment, it can be the act of wasting company time, using resources for personal projects, or taking credit for a colleague's work. It can even be the subtle theft of another person's time and emotional energy, demanding their attention and care without consideration for their own needs and capacity. To practice this precept is to cultivate a deep and thorough honesty in all of our dealings. It is a commitment to live with transparency and integrity, earning what we have through our own fair efforts. The true beauty of this discipline, however, is found not just in the restraint it teaches, but in the virtue it encourages. The direct opposite of a mind that takes is a mind that gives. The active practice of this precept is the cultivation of dana, or generosity. It is the development of a heart that delights in offering, in sharing, in contributing. This generosity is not limited to material things. We can be generous with our time, offering it to someone who needs help. We can be generous with our kind attention, listening deeply to a friend who is struggling. We can be generous with our praise and encouragement, acknowledging the good in others. We can be generous with our forgiveness, letting go of grievances that burden us and others. Practicing this precept is a radical shift from a mindset of scarcity, which is always asking, "What's in it for me? What can I get?" to a mindset of abundance, which asks, "What can I offer? How can I contribute?" It is the discovery that the greatest happiness is found, not in accumulating, but in giving. The third precept, to abstain from sexual misconduct, addresses the powerful, beautiful, and often complicated energy of human sexuality. The aim of this precept is not to instill guilt or shame, but to ensure that this profound aspect of our lives becomes a source of genuine connection and joy, rather than a cause of harm, betrayal, and suffering. Misconduct in this context is best understood as any sexual expression that involves exploitation, coercion, or deceit. It is about refraining from actions that cause pain to ourselves or to others. This means respecting the commitments of fidelity within a relationship, as breaking this trust causes some of the deepest wounds a human can experience. It means ensuring that consent is always clear, enthusiastic, and ongoing, and never taking advantage of another person's vulnerability. It is about seeing our partners not as objects for our own gratification, but as complex beings deserving of tenderness, respect, and care. This discipline invites us to bring our mindfulness practice into our most intimate relationships. It asks us to be honest about our desires, to communicate with our partners respectfully, and to always consider the potential impact of our actions on their well-being. By doing so, we create a foundation of safety and trust, where true intimacy, a meeting of hearts, and not just bodies, can flourish. Taken together, these three facets of right action reverence for life, generous honesty, and respectful intimacy form a complete training for how to live in the world. They are the practical application of the wisdom and compassion we have been cultivating inwardly. They are the evidence of a transformed mind. When we commit to right action, we become a sanctuary for those around us. People feel safe in our presence. They feel seen and respected. Our life itself becomes an offering, a testament to the possibility of living with a seamless integrity between our deepest values and our daily actions. This ethical foundation not only brings peace to our relationships and our community, it also creates a profound sense of inner peace, a freedom from the guilt, regret, and anxiety that come from causing harm. And as this integrity solidifies in our personal lives, it naturally asks to be expressed in the sphere where we dedicate so much of our time and energy. Our work, having established a foundation of ethical action in our personal lives, the path now extends into the sphere where we spend the majority of our waking hours. Our work. For many of us, our profession is more than just a job. It is a significant part of our identity, the primary way we interact with society, and the source of our material sustenance. The fifth step on the path, right livelihood or sama ajiva, addresses this crucial area of life directly. It asks a profound and sometimes uncomfortable question. Is the way I earn my living a source of harmony and well-being? Or does it contribute to the suffering of myself and others? Right livelihood is the practice of bringing the integrity of right action into our economic life. ensuring that our work is not an obstacle to our spiritual path, but an integral part of it. It is the conscious effort to dissolve the artificial barrier between our work life and our real life, and to weave a single, seamless fabric of ethical and mindful existence. This is not a demand that everyone quit their job to become a hermit, but rather a deep and honest inquiry into the impact and intention of our professional lives. The practice of right livelihood begins with the same principle that underlies all Buddhist ethics, the principle of harmlessness. There are certain professions that, by their very nature, are founded upon causing direct harm and are therefore considered to be wrong livelihood. The Buddha originally identified 5 specific trades to be avoided. First, any business involving weapons, for their purpose is to injure and destroy life. Second, any business in living beings, which traditionally included the slave trade, but extends to any practice that treats humans or animals as mere commodities to be exploited. Third, any business in meat, which involves the direct act of slaughter. Fourth, any business in poisons, substances designed to kill or harm. And fifth, any business in intoxicants, which cloud the mind and lead to heedlessness and suffering. The underlying principle is clear and timeless. If a profession requires you to violate the most basic precepts of non-harming, it will inevitably poison your own mind, create negative karma, and make inner peace impossible to attain. In our complex global economy, we can expand this traditional framework to guide our own ethical reflections. A business in weapons today might not only mean manufacturing arms, but also working for a media outlet that profits from sensationalizing conflict and stoking hatred. A business in living beings can be seen in corporations that rely on exploitative labor practices, or in industrial factory farming that inflicts immense cruelty on animals. The trade in poisons can be understood to include industries that knowingly pollute our air, water, and soil with toxic chemicals for profit, or even a career in advertising that spreads the mental poison of materialism and inadequacy to sell a product. The trade in intoxicants now clearly includes not only harmful drugs and alcohol, but could be extended metaphorically to the design of addictive technologies, like certain gambling applications or social media platforms that are engineered to hijack our attention, promote distraction, and foster a state of mental intoxication. This list is not meant to be a rigid set of rules for judging others, but a personal compass. It invites us to look honestly at the work we do and ask, does my work support life, or does it diminish it? Does it create health, or does it create harm? Does it promote clarity, or does it promote delusion? However, right livelihood is not merely about avoiding the negative. It has a joyful and deeply fulfilling positive dimension. It is the active search for work that aligns with our deepest values and allows us to be of genuine service to the world. It is about shifting our perspective on work from being simply a means to a paycheck to being a meaningful expression of our life's purpose. This doesn't mean that everyone must work for a charity or become a social activist. The forms of right livelihood are as varied as human talents. A teacher who awakens the minds of children, a nurse or doctor who tends to the sick with compassion, an engineer who designs clean water systems, an artist who creates beauty that uplifts the human spirit, a conflict mediator who builds bridges of understanding, an organic farmer who cares for the earth, even an honest plumber or electrician whose skills are essential for a functioning society. All of these can be noble forms of right livelihood when undertaken with skill and a compassionate intention. when our work feels like a genuine contribution, when we feel that our unique talents are being used to lessen suffering or increase well-being in some small way, our relationship with it is transformed. The division between work and life dissolves. The energy we expend is no longer just drained from us. It becomes part of a fulfilling and virtuous cycle. But what if we don't have the luxury of choice? Many people find themselves in jobs that are unfulfilling, tedious, or even morally compromising, simply because they need to support their families. Does this mean the path is closed to them? Absolutely not. This is where the deepest and most accessible teaching of right livelihood comes into play. It teaches that while the what of our work is important, the how is ultimately where the practice lies. Any form of labor, no matter how humble or seemingly mundane, can be transformed into a profound spiritual practice through the application of mindfulness and right intention. Consider the Zen story of the master carpenter in a monastery. He was known for his exquisite work, but also for his unhurried pace. A visitor, watching him, saw that before sawing a piece of wood, the carpenter would first stand before it, breathing for a full minute. Before hammering a nail, he would hold the hammer and nail, fully present, feeling their weight and texture. Every action was performed with a deliberate, focused, and reverent attention. His work was not a means to an end. Each movement was an end in itself. His workshop was his meditation hall. His craft was his path. This story shows us that the sacred is not found in a particular type of work, but in a particular quality of attention that we can bring to any work. We can bring right speech into our interactions with colleagues, clients, and customers, choosing kindness over harshness and honesty over deceit. We can bring right action into our tasks, performing them with integrity and care, finding a quiet satisfaction in a job well done. We can use the inevitable stresses and frustrations of the workplace, a difficult boss, a tedious project, an annoying co-worker, not as sources of complaint, but as opportunities to practice patience, to observe our own reactions, and to cultivate equanimity. We can learn to wash the dishes, to write the code, to file the papers, to serve the table, with the same mindful presence that a monk brings to their walking meditation. In this way, right livelihood becomes the ultimate practice of integration. It is the art of weaving a single life, where the values we cultivate in our meditation and reflection are the same values we embody in our professional conduct. It dissolves the painful split that many people feel between the person they want to be and the person they have to be from 9 to 5. It creates a life of wholeness, integrity, and deep, quiet satisfaction. The first 5 steps of the path, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, and right livelihood, have now established a firm and ethical foundation for our life. They have cleared our vision, purified our heart, and harmonized our engagement with the world. We are standing on solid ground. Now, with this stability secured, we are prepared to undertake the direct and transformative work of training the mind itself, the very engine of our experience. This begins with the cultivation of right effort. Having established a life of ethical integrity through right speech, right action, and right livelihood, we stand on solid ground. The outer world of our conduct has been harmonized with our inner aspirations. The path now turns deeply inward, moving from the foundation of ethical conduct to the direct cultivation of the mind itself. This is where the real transformation takes place, in the vast, fertile, and often wild landscape of our own consciousness. The 6th step on the path, right effort, or samavayama, is the beginning of this inner work. It is the art of skillfully and joyfully, tending the garden of the mind. Left to its own devices, a garden will be overgrown with weeds. This is their nature. Similarly, a mind left untended will often be choked by the weeds of anxiety, resentment, greed, and confusion. Right effort is the wise and gentle art of gardening. It is the understanding of what to cultivate, what to remove, and how to apply our energy in a way that creates a flourishing and beautiful inner world. It is crucial, however, to understand what is meant by effort in this context. In our modern culture, which prizes achievement and relentless striving, effort often implies a tense, forceful, white-knuckled struggle. We think of pushing through pain and gritting our teeth to reach a goal. This is not right effort. The Buddhist term, vayama, is closer in feeling to diligence, perseverance, or the steady application of energy. It is not the violent force of a sledgehammer, but the persistent, gentle force of water flowing over a stone. It is an energy that is balanced, intelligent, and imbued with a sense of ease. There is a story of a monk named Sona who perfectly illustrates this principle. Before becoming a monk, Sona was a masterful musician, renowned for his skill with the lute. As a monk, he applied the same intensity to his meditation, practicing walking meditation so relentlessly that the soles of his feet bled. Yet, despite his extreme effort, his mind was not finding peace. He grew discouraged and thought of giving up. The Buddha, knowing his thoughts, visited him and asked a simple question. Sona, when you were a musician, what would happen if the strings of your lute were too tight? Sona replied, Lord, they would snap. And what would happen if they were too loose? The Buddha asked. Lord, they would not make a sound. And what if they were tuned just right, neither too tight nor too loose? Then, Lord, Sona said, the lute would produce a beautiful and resonant melody. The Buddha smiled. So it is, Sona, with spiritual practice. If your effort is too tense and strained, it will lead only to restlessness and agitation. If your effort is too lax and lazy, it will lead to dullness and lethargy. Only an effort that is balanced and well-tuned, like the strings of your lute, can produce the beautiful melody of peace. Right effort, then, is this art of tuning our energy, finding the wise middle way between frantic striving and passive inaction. It is this balanced, joyful diligence that we apply to the four great efforts of mental cultivation. The first of these is the effort to prevent unwholesome states from arising. This is the most proactive and skillful form of effort. It is the wisdom of guarding the gates of our senses. We recognize that our inner state is profoundly influenced by what we allow into our minds through our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and thoughts. This practice is not about hiding from the world, but about making conscious choices about what we consume. If we know that watching violent news or engaging in angry online debates leaves our mind agitated and fearful, the effort to prevent means choosing to limit our exposure. If we know that mindlessly scrolling through social media feeds that are designed to provoke envy and comparison leaves us feeling inadequate, the effort to prevent means choosing to put the phone down and go for a walk instead. It is the simple, wise act of not planting weed seeds in our garden in the first place. We learn to recognize the early warning signs of negativity and skillfully steer our attention towards something more wholesome before the unwholesome state has a chance to take root. The second is the effort to overcome or abandon unwholesome states that have already arisen. Despite our best preventative efforts, weeds will still sprout. A thought of anger will flare up. A wave of jealousy will wash over us. A familiar craving will surface. The unskillful response is either to indulge the state, letting it take over, or to suppress it, trying to violently push it out of our awareness. Both of these approaches give the weed more strength. Right effort offers a more intelligent, multi-step strategy. First, we simply recognize its presence, without judgment. There is anger. We meet it with awareness, not with fear or guilt. Second, we accept it. For a moment, we let it be there, giving it a little space, understanding that it is just a temporary mental event, not our true identity. Third, we can investigate it with a gentle curiosity. What triggered this? Where do I feel this anger in my body? A tightness in the jaw, a heat in the chest. This investigation robs the emotion of its raw power. Finally, we can skillfully replace the unwholesome thought. This is not suppression, but a redirection of energy. We can gently replace a thought of resentment with a thought of loving kindness. We can counter a feeling of stinginess with a deliberate thought of generosity. We are not fighting the weed, but rather choosing to plant a beautiful flower right next to it, which will eventually draw the energy and sunlight to itself. The third great effort is the joyful work of actively cultivating wholesome states that have not yet arisen. This is the practice of deliberately planting flowers in our garden. It is not enough to simply remove the negative. We must actively nurture the positive. This is where we make time for practices that develop qualities like compassion, gratitude, joy, and patience. It can be as simple as starting each day by spending a few minutes actively cultivating feelings of loving kindness, wishing well for ourselves, our loved ones, and even our enemies. It can be the practice of keeping a gratitude journal, writing down 3 things each day that we are thankful for, training the mind to notice the good that is already present. It can be the deliberate practice of what is called sympathetic joy, consciously rejoicing in the happiness and success of others as a direct antidote to envy. This is a profoundly creative and uplifting aspect of the path. We are not just weeding, we are actively landscaping our inner world, making it a place of beauty, warmth, and light. The fourth and final great effort is to maintain and nurture the wholesome states that have already arisen. This is the practice of tending to the flowers once they have sprouted. Often, when a moment of genuine peace, happiness, or clarity arises in our day, we barely notice it. It is a fleeting good feeling, and then our mind is immediately off to the next problem or the next desire. This fourth effort is the practice of learning to savor these wholesome moments. When a feeling of calm settles over you, don't just rush past it. Pause, recognize it, appreciate it, feel it fully in your body. When you experience a moment of genuine connection with another person, stay with that feeling. Let it sink in. By giving our full attention to these positive states, we strengthen their neural pathways in our brain. We are watering the flowers, giving them the attention they need to grow strong and blossom. We are showing our mind what we value, and over time, the mind will naturally incline towards these states more and more readily. This fourfold effort, undertaken with the balanced energy of the well-tuned lute, is not a grim and joyless task. There is a deep pleasure inherent in the process. There is a liberating joy in letting go of a painful grudge. There is a radiant joy in cultivating a heart of boundless kindness. There is a peaceful joy in resting in a moment of calm. This effort is not a struggle against ourselves, but a joyful return to our own deepest nature, which, when unobscured by the weeds of greed and aversion, is naturally peaceful and luminous. This diligent, intelligent, and joyful gardening, however, is not done in the dark. To know which plants are weeds and which are flowers, to know when to water and when to let be, requires a clear and steady light. That indispensable tool that guiding light that illuminates the entire garden of the mind, is the practice of right mindfulness. If right effort is the diligent and joyful act of tending the garden of our mind, then right mindfulness, or samasati, is the clear, steady light that allows us to do this work. Without this light, we are gardening in the dark. We cannot distinguish the weeds from the flowers. We do not know when to water or when to let be. Right mindfulness is the very heart of the Buddha's teaching, the central pillar that supports every other aspect of the path. It is the essential faculty of awareness, the simple yet profound capacity to pay attention to the present moment, as it is, without judgment. The original Pali word, sati, carries a sense of remembering. It is the practice of remembering to return, again and again, when the mind wanders into the thickets of past regrets or future anxieties. Mindfulness is the gentle act of remembering to come back to the breath, come back to the body, come back to this one singular, precious moment of existence, for it is the only place where life is actually happening. This is not a mystical state or a complex intellectual exercise. It is the simple art of arriving. It is the light of awareness that, without changing anything, changes everything simply by its presence. The Buddha, with his characteristic precision, laid out a comprehensive training program for this awareness, known as the 4 foundations of mindfulness. This is not a linear progression, but 4 interconnected fields in which we can cultivate this clear seeing. The first foundation, and the most common starting point, is mindfulness of the body. The body is our most tangible anchor to the present. While our mind can time travel effortlessly, our body is always, undeniably, here and now. The primary practice here is mindfulness of breathing. We simply rest our attention on the natural, unforced rhythm of the breath as it enters and leaves the body. We feel the sensation of the air at the tip of the nostrils, or the gentle rise and fall of the abdomen. We are not trying to control the breath or make it deeper or slower. We are simply knowing it. Now the breath is coming in. Now the breath is going out. When the mind wanders, as it inevitably will, we gently and kindly notice that it has wandered, and without any scolding, we guide it back to the breath. This practice is a profound training in patience and gentleness. The breath becomes a faithful friend, an anchor in any storm, a home to which we can always return. From the breath, this awareness can expand to include all the sensations of the body, the feeling of our feet on the floor, the warmth of our hands, the tightness in our shoulders, the tingling in our fingers. We learn to observe these sensations as pure energy, as changing phenomena, without layering on stories of, I like this, or I don't like that. This grounds us, calms the nervous system, and begins to loosen the tight identification we have with our physical form. The second foundation is mindfulness of feelings, or, more accurately, feeling tones. In the Buddhist understanding, Vedana, or feeling tone, is the raw, immediate quality of any experience, before we attach a complex emotional label to it. Every moment of experience has one of 3 tones. It is either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. When you take a sip of warm tea on a cold day, there is a pleasant feeling, tone. When you stub your toe, there is an unpleasant feeling, tone. When you are simply sitting, waiting for a bus, the tone might be neutral. The practice here is to simply notice, with a light and curious attention, which of these 3 tones is present from moment to moment. The insight this brings is revolutionary. We begin to see, with stunning clarity, the automatic, unconscious habit of our mind. It compulsively grasps at and clings to the pleasant, violently pushes away and resists the unpleasant, and completely ignores the neutral, treating it as boring. This is the very mechanism of tanha, the thirst, playing out in real time. By simply watching this process without getting caught in it, we introduce a pause, a space of freedom. We learn that it is possible to experience an unpleasant sensation without adding the second arrow of mental resistance to it. We can experience a pleasant sensation without the anxiety of clinging to it. We are no longer a slave to the constant push and pull of our likes and dislikes. The third foundation is mindfulness of the mind itself, or consciousness. This is the practice of turning the light of awareness onto the mind's own states and moods. We learn to observe our mind as we would observe the weather. Now the mind is sunny and clear. Now it is cloudy and overcast. Now there is a storm of anger. Now there is a gentle rain of sadness. The key is to see these states as impersonal, transient phenomena that pass through the mind, rather than as who we are. Instead of thinking, "I am angry," which creates a solid, suffocating identity, we learn to observe. There is a feeling of anger present in the mind. This simple shift in language reflects a profound shift in perspective. It creates a space between the observer and the observed. We are no longer swept away by every passing mood. We are the vast open sky of awareness, and the moods are merely clouds passing through. They are not the sky itself. This practice allows us to hold our emotional life with a tremendous amount of compassion and wisdom, untangling ourselves from the drama of our own mental states. The fourth foundation is mindfulness of mental objects or phenomena. This is the most comprehensive practice, where we learn to see our entire experience through the clarifying lens of the core teachings. We observe how the 5 hindrances, desire, ill will, sloth, restlessness, and doubt arise in the mind, and how they pass away when we meet them with awareness. We learn to deconstruct our experience into the 5 aggregates form: feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, and see directly that there is no solid, permanent self to be found within them, only a dynamic, flowing process. We see the 4 noble truths playing out in every moment. We see a moment of dukkha. We see the tanha that caused it. We feel the peace of its cessation when we let go, and we recognize that this very act of mindfulness is the path itself. This is where mindfulness deepens into what we call insight or vipassana. It is the direct, unmediated seeing into the nature of reality itself, using the laboratory of our own moment-to-moment experience. This powerful training is not confined to the meditation cushion. The ultimate goal of mindfulness is to bring this quality of awake, non-judgmental presence into every corner of our lives. It is the art of arriving fully in our own life. We can practice mindful eating by taking a moment to see and smell our food, and by tasting each bite with our full attention, rather than eating distractedly while watching a screen. We can practice mindful walking, feeling the sensations of our feet, making contact with the earth. We can practice mindful listening, offering another person the rare and precious gift of our complete, undivided attention. There is a beautiful story of a water bearer who carried 2 large pots of water every day. One pot was perfect, but the other had a crack in it. By the time he arrived home, the cracked pot was always half empty. The cracked pot felt a deep sense of shame for its imperfection, for being able to do only half of what it was made for. One day, it apologized to the water bearer. The water bearer smiled and said, "Did you notice that on your side of the path, beautiful flowers grow, but not on the other pot's side? That is because I have always known about your crack, and I planted flower seeds on your side of the path. Every day, as we walk home, you have been watering them. Mindfulness is like the wisdom of this water bearer. It doesn't demand that we be perfect, unbroken vessels. It allows us to see the whole of our reality with compassion. It helps us find the unexpected beauty and utility in our perceived flaws and imperfections. It helps us accept ourselves as we are, a mix of strengths and cracks, and to see the value in the whole journey. As we cultivate this steady, accepting, and luminous presence in our lives, the scattered fragments of our attention begin to coalesce. The mind, once restless and fragmented, becomes calm, unified, and powerful. This growing stability, born of mindfulness, leads us naturally to the culmination of mental training, the deep and restorative peace of right concentration. In the journey of cultivating the mind, we have learned to apply our energy with the balanced wisdom of right effort, guided by the clear, illuminating light of right mindfulness. These two qualities, working in harmony, prepare the ground for the eighth and final step of the noble path, right concentration, or samadhi. If mindfulness is the act of holding a steady light, concentration is what happens when that light becomes so stable, so unwavering, that it penetrates the deepest layers of our experience. Imagine the ordinary, untrained mind. It is like the surface of a lake on a windy day, choppy, agitated, and reflecting 1,000 fragmented, distorted images of the sky above. It is pulled in every direction by passing sights and sounds, by memories of the past, and anxieties about the future. It is a state of constant distraction, a subtle but exhausting internal fragmentation. Right concentration is the practice that allows the wind to die down. It is the gathering of our scattered mental energies into a single, unified, and powerful stream. The surface of the lake becomes perfectly still, like a flawless mirror, reflecting the world with perfect, undistorted clarity. This is not a state of tension or strain. It is a state of profound rest, tranquility, and collected power. The most eloquent metaphor for this process is that of a simple glass of muddy water. The water represents our mind, and the mud and sediment suspended within it represent the mental and emotional agitations that keep it clouded. These are the 5 hindrances: our craving for pleasant experiences, our aversion to unpleasant ones, the dull fogginess of sloth and lethargy, the anxious buzzing of restlessness and worry, and the paralyzing grip of skeptical doubt. As long as we are constantly shaking the glass by, reacting to every stimulus, indulging every craving, fighting every discomfort, and getting lost in worry, the water will remain opaque. We cannot see through it. Our perception of ourselves and the world is clouded by the turmoil of our own mind. The practice of developing concentration is not, as many believe, an act of forcefully trying to separate the mud from the water. It is far simpler and far more profound. It is the gentle and patient act of placing the glass on a steady surface and allowing it to be still. We don't have to do anything to the mud. When the agitation ceases, the mud, by its own nature, will slowly, gracefully settle to the bottom. The water, in turn, will, by its own nature, become clear. This stillness is samadhi. The resulting clarity is the birth of wisdom. This shows us that concentration is not an aggressive act of doing, but a compassionate act of non-doing, of allowing the mind to come to rest in its own natural state of peace. The work of developing this stillness, then, is the work of understanding. and pacifying the 5 hindrances, the very forces that keep the water in our mind perpetually stirred up. Right effort and right mindfulness are the tools we use for this task. The first hindrance is sensual desire, the mind's constant leaning out towards pleasant sights, sounds, tastes, smells, and sensations. It is the "I'll be happy when" syndrome, the belief that peace can be found in the next satisfying experience. Mindfulness allows us to see this craving as it arises, without judging it. We notice the pull, the wanting. Right effort is the gentle act of not feeding it, of letting the desire be there without acting on it, understanding its impermanent and ultimately unsatisfying nature. The second hindrance is ill will or aversion, the mind's pushing away of unpleasant experiences. It is the anger, resentment, frustration, and hatred that arise when things don't go our way. The antidote here is the active cultivation of metta, or loving kindness. When a thought of anger arises, we don't fight fire with fire. We meet it with the cooling water of a compassionate wish for ourselves and for the other person to be well. This softens the mind's hard edges and dissolves the bitterness of aversion. The third hindrance is sloth and torpor, a heavy, dull, sleepy state of mind. It is a lack of energy, a mental fog that makes practice seem impossible. It is the feeling of being half asleep even when we are awake. The antidote is the conscious rousing of energy. We can stand up and do some walking meditation. We can splash cold water on our face. We can bring to mind inspiring thoughts, like the preciousness of this human life and the rare opportunity we have to practice. We learn to skillfully apply energy to counteract the mind's tendency towards inertia. The fourth hindrance is restlessness and worry, the agitated monkey mind that cannot settle. It is the mind that flits from thought to thought, plagued by anxiety about things we did in the past or what might happen in the future. The primary antidote here is the return to the breath. The breath is always in the present moment. By patiently and repeatedly returning our attention to the simple, physical sensation of breathing, we give the restless mind a calm, stable anchor. It is like giving a frantic monkey a single branch to hold on to, allowing it to finally be still. The fifth hindrance is skeptical doubt. This is not the intelligent inquiry that is encouraged on the path, but a corrosive, paralyzing doubt that questions our own ability, the validity of the teachings, or the possibility of awakening. It drains our energy and makes us want to give up. The antidote is to seek wise friendship and counsel, to patiently reflect on the teachings until they make sense to us, and most importantly, to place our trust in our own direct experience. We learn to trust the small moments of peace and clarity that arise in our practice, letting them be the proof that the path is leading somewhere. As we learn to skillfully work with these 5 hindrances, a remarkable transformation occurs. The mud begins to settle. The mind, no longer pulled in 5 different directions, begins to unify. As the mind gathers and unifies around the object of meditation, such as the breath, it can enter into states of profound absorption and bliss, known as the jhanas. This is a topic that can seem esoteric, but it can be understood as a natural unfolding of the mind's potential for happiness and peace. It is essential not to see these states as goals to be achieved or trophies to be collected, as this very striving becomes another form of craving. Rather, they are like beautiful, lush landscapes that we naturally enter into when the obstacles have been cleared from the path. In the first of these states, the mind is still active with thought, but it is a focused, wholesome thought directed at the meditation object. And born of this seclusion from the hindrances, an intense feeling of joy and happiness arises. It is like a wanderer lost in a desert who stumbles upon a hidden spring of cool, clear water. The feeling is one of ecstatic relief and delight. As the concentration deepens, we enter a state where the active thinking process subsides. The mind becomes silent, yet remains intensely alert. The joy and happiness grow even stronger, now born not just of seclusion, but of the profound stability of concentration itself. The spring has now become a deep, calm, and self-sustaining lake. Continuing further, the exhilarating, energetic quality of joy begins to fade, replaced by a more sober, all-pervading happiness and a powerful sense of equanimity. The mind is utterly serene and unshakable, like the surface of that deep lake at midnight, perfectly still and reflecting the vastness of the cosmos without a single ripple. These states are not otherworldly escapes. They are the discovery of a profound well-being and pleasure that is not dependent on anything external. It is a happiness that comes from within, born of a purified and unified mind. This raises an important question. Is the goal of all this practice simply to feel blissful and peaceful in meditation? The answer is a definitive no. Concentration is not an escape from life. It is a preparation for seeing life with radical clarity. A concentrated mind is a powerful mind. Just as diffuse sunlight can be focused through a magnifying glass to create a point of intense heat that can start a fire, the gathered energy of a concentrated mind can generate an insight so powerful it can burn through the deepest veils of ignorance. This is the ultimate purpose of right concentration, to create the perfect, stable platform for wisdom to arise. When the mind is agitated and cloudy, our vision is obscured. But when the mind is as still and clear as a flawless mirror, it can reflect reality exactly as it is. In this state of luminous stillness, we can turn our attention to the nature of our own experience and see, not as a theory but as a direct, felt reality, the truth of impermanence, the nature of suffering, and the illusion of a separate self. The stability of concentration prevents the mind from being swept away by fear or denial when these profound truths reveal themselves. Mindfulness is the clear-eyed scientist who looks through the microscope. Concentration is the perfectly stable platform upon which the microscope rests. Both are indispensable. They are the two wings of a bird, and together they allow us to soar to the heights of liberation. Right concentration is the beautiful culmination of the path of mental discipline. It is the state of being truly at home in our own mind, no longer a refugee from our own experience. It is the gathering of our fragmented self into a unified, focused, and integrated whole. It is the discovery of a deep wellspring of peace and joy that lies within us, independent of the changing conditions of the external world. With the full presentation of this 8th step, our map of the path is complete. We have explored the way of wisdom that clears our view, the way of ethical conduct that purifies our actions, and the way of mental discipline that unifies our mind. With this holistic framework in hand, we are now equipped to look more directly at the fundamental laws of existence that this path is designed to help us understand and embody, beginning with the most undeniable, relentless, and transformative truth of all, the universal reality of change. Having walked the eightfold path and established a life of ethical integrity and a mind trained in stillness, we are now prepared to look directly into the very nature of reality itself. The insights that arise from a clear and concentrated mind are not complex philosophical speculations. They are direct perceptions of the fundamental laws that govern all existence. The first, most immediate, and most transformative of these insights is a deep, unwavering recognition of the truth of anicca, or impermanence. We live our lives as if we are standing on solid ground, building our homes, careers, and relationships with the assumption of stability. But the spiritual path invites us to look closer, to feel the ground beneath our feet, and to recognize that what we thought was solid rock is, in fact, the surface of a flowing river. From the birth and death of distant stars in the cosmic darkness, to the silent, constant replacement of the cells in our own bodies, everything, without exception, is in a state of ceaseless flux. Anicca is not a Buddhist doctrine to be believed. It is the most fundamental, observable law of the universe. The core of human suffering arises from a simple, tragic conflict. Our consciousness, with its capacity for memory and imagination, develops a profound psychological craving for permanence in a universe that offers none. We resist the flow, we try to dam the river, and in this struggle against the very nature of reality, we create for ourselves a state of perpetual anxiety, frustration, and disappointment. The purpose of contemplating impermanence, therefore, is not to fall into a state of bleak resignation. It is to undertake a radical and liberating shift in perspective, to stop fighting the current and instead learn to build a raft, to become a graceful and fearless navigator on the great river of life. To truly understand this truth, we must learn to see it operating on every scale of existence, from the vast and impersonal to the intimate and momentary. On the grandest, geological and cosmic scale, we can see impermanence written in the landscape of our planet. Mountains that seem to be symbols of eternal strength are being relentlessly worn down by wind and rain. Continents drift, oceans rise and fall. On an even vaster scale, the stars we see in the night sky are not static points of light. They are immense thermonuclear furnaces engaged in a life cycle of birth, maturity, and spectacular death, their ashes seeding the universe with the very elements that make up our bodies. Contemplating this immense, slow, and impersonal dance of change can instill a sense of awe and perspective. It helps us to see that our own personal dramas, our successes and failures, are but tiny ripples in an infinite ocean of becoming. It loosens the grip of our ego's self-importance and connects us to a process that is far older and greater than ourselves. Then, we bring the lens closer to the biological and social scale of our own lives. Our body, which we so strongly identify with, is a perfect illustration of a flowing process. It is never the same from one moment to the next. It grows, it strengthens, it ages, it gets sick, it recovers. The face you see in the mirror today is subtly different from the one you saw a year ago. The very cells of your tissues are constantly dying and being replaced. To see the body not as a solid static object, but as a temporary, ever-changing community of interdependent processes is a profound shift. Our relationships, too, are living, changing things. Friendships that were once central to our lives can drift apart. New connections can blossom unexpectedly. The dynamics within our families evolve as people grow and change. To expect a relationship to remain frozen in its initial, perfect state is to condemn it to failure. To allow it to breathe, change, and evolve is to give it the chance to live. Likewise, our societies, our cultures, our languages, and our ideas of what is right and wrong are all impermanent. The world of our grandparents is a foreign country. The world we are building now will seem just as ancient to our descendants. Clinging to any particular social arrangement or cultural norm as absolute and eternal is to stand against the tide of history. The most powerful and transformative perception of anicca, however, occurs at the microscopic level of our own moment-to-moment experience, accessible through the practice of mindfulness. When we sit quietly and watch our own minds, We are watching impermanence in its most immediate form. We observe the ceaseless waterfall of thoughts. A thought about work arises, lingers for a second, and dissolves, only to be replaced by a memory from childhood, which in turn is replaced by a worry about tomorrow. Try to hold on to a single thought, and it vanishes, like trying to catch smoke in your hands. We can also observe our emotions. A wave of sadness may arise. If we observe it mindfully, we can feel its physical signature in the body, a heaviness in the chest, a lump in the throat. We can watch as it crests, holds its shape for a time, and then, if we do not feed it with stories, it naturally begins to subside and transform into something else. Joy, anger, fear, peace, are known of them, are permanent residents. They are simply weather patterns passing through the vast sky of our awareness. We can observe the raw sensations in our body, an itch, a warmth, a dull ache, a pleasant coolness. Each one arises, asserts itself, and passes away. This direct, non-conceptual observation is what moves the understanding of anicca from the head to the heart. It is no longer a philosophical idea we agree with, but a living, breathing reality we are experiencing in every moment. The profound suffering in our lives comes not from this natural flow of change, but from our deep-seated psychological resistance to it. This resistance takes two primary forms: clinging and aversion. Clinging is our attempt to grasp onto pleasant experiences and freeze them in time. When we are having a perfect moment, a beautiful sunset, a joyful celebration, a feeling of luva, subtle fear of its ending often arises. This fear poisons the experience itself. In our desperation to make the moment last, we are no longer fully present for it. We are already mourning its passing while it is still here. We take endless photographs, trying to capture a feeling that cannot be captured, and we become ghosts haunting the archives of our own past happiness. Aversion is the opposite side of the same coin. It is our violent pushing away of unpleasant experiences. When we feel physical pain, emotional hurt, or sadness, our instinctive reaction is to declare war on the feeling. This resistance creates a powerful inner tension. It is the experience of the second arrow. The first arrow is the unavoidable pain of life. The illness, the loss, the failure, it hurts. The second arrow is the suffering we add on top through our mental reaction. This shouldn't be happening. I can't stand this. Why me? This second arrow, the arrow of resistance, is often far more painful and enduring than the first. To embrace impermanence is to learn how to feel the sting of the first arrow without firing the second one into ourselves. It is the wisdom encapsulated in the ancient phrase, "This too shall pass." When spoken in a moment of great joy, it is not a cynical downer, but a reminder to be fully present and grateful, for this moment is precious and fleeting. When whispered in a time of deep sorrow, it is not a dismissal of our pain, but a profound beacon of hope, a promise that no storm lasts forever, that the sun will shine again. When we stop fighting with reality and begin to truly accept the law of impermanence, something remarkable happens. The truth of anicca ceases to be a threat and becomes our greatest teacher. Its first lesson is the lesson of presence, because this moment, right now, will never, ever come again in the entire history of the cosmos. It becomes infinitely precious. The casual cup of tea becomes a unique ceremony. The ordinary conversation with a loved one becomes a sacred encounter. Anicca is a constant call to wake up to our lives. It urges us to stop living in the rehearsals of the future or the reruns of the past, and to show up for the main event, the present moment. In Zen art, this spirit is captured in the enso, a circle drawn with a single, fluid, expressive brushstroke. The beauty of the Enso is not just in its final form, but in the alive, unrepeatable, present moment energy of its creation. The Zen master may then wipe the circle away, demonstrating the final lesson. The beauty was in the becoming, not in the being. To cling to the finished product is to miss the point entirely. Living with this understanding cultivates a profound resilience and flexibility. A person who clings to rigid ideas of how life should be is like a mighty oak tree in a hurricane. They resist and resist until their very foundations crack and they are violently uprooted. A person who understands impermanence is like a bamboo stalk. They are rooted, yes, but they are also flexible. When the winds of change blow, they bend, they yield, they dance with the wind. And when the storm passes, they are still standing, unharmed. This acceptance of change fosters a deep, trusting surrender to the flow of life, a letting go of the exhausting burden of trying to control the uncontrollable. Finally, seeing the fragile, fleeting nature of all things deepens our compassion. When we see that we, and all the people around us, are riding these same waves, the joys of youth, the challenges of aging, the pain of sickness, the certainty of death, our hearts naturally soften. The illusion of our separateness begins to dissolve in the recognition of our shared vulnerability. The conflicts and grievances that seemed so important begin to lose their power in the face of this vast, shared truth. Impermanence is the great equalizer, and in seeing it clearly, we find our common humanity. It is not, therefore, a sorrowful truth that must be endured. It is a liberating insight that, when embraced, allows us to live with more presence, more gratitude, more courage, and more love. And as we rest in this deep seeing of the ceaseless flow of all phenomena, a fundamental question naturally arises. If everything I identify with this body, these feelings, these thoughts is constantly changing, constantly flowing, then who or what is the permanent, solid I that I have always believed myself to be? Where is the unchanging self that fears this river of change? This question opens the door to the next great exploration on the path, the most profound and liberating insight of all. After journeying through the truth of universal change, standing in the ever-flowing river of Anicca, we arrive at the most profound, most challenging, and most liberating insight of the Buddha's teaching. It is an insight that strikes at the very root of our identity, at the most fundamental assumption we make about ourselves and the world. We have seen that our body is in constant flux, our feelings are a fleeting parade, and our thoughts are like clouds passing in the sky. This naturally gives rise to a critical question. If everything I experience is impermanent, then who or what is the permanent, unchanging I that is experiencing it all? We live with the deep, unspoken conviction that there is a thinker behind the thoughts, a feeler behind the feelings, a stable, continuous self who is the protagonist of our life story. We are the ghost in the machine, the CEO in the headquarters of the mind. The teaching of anatta, or no self, is a direct, radical challenge to this assumption. It asks us to become investigators, to take up the light of mindfulness and search for this solid, independent self. And it reveals the startling truth that when we look for it with honesty and precision, it simply cannot be found. This is not a nihilistic declaration that we do not exist. It is a supremely liberating truth that frees us from the heaviest burden we carry, the exhausting, lifelong project of defending, promoting, and protecting a self that was only ever a fiction to begin with. To begin this investigation, the Buddha provided a brilliant analytical tool, a way to deconstruct our experience into its component parts. These are known as the 5 aggregates, or the 5 heaps, which together constitute what we call a person. By examining each of these aggregates in turn, we can see if a permanent self resides in any of them. The first aggregate is form. This is our physical body or flesh, bones, blood, and breath. Is the self to be found here? We cherish our body and identify with it strongly, but as we have seen, the body is a perfect illustration of impermanence. It is a temporary collection of elements, constantly changing, aging, and heading towards its own dissolution. Is the self the whole body, or just a part, like the brain? If it is a part, which part? The deeper we look, the more we see the body not as a solid entity, but as a dynamic process. It is a river of changing sensations, not a fixed object. If the body is always changing, how can it be the foundation for a permanent, unchanging self? We see that the self is not the body. The second aggregate is feeling. This refers to the raw feeling tones that arise with every moment of experience. Pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Are we our feelings? We are certainly driven by them. We spend our lives chasing pleasant feelings and running from unpleasant ones. But feelings are even more fleeting than the body. A moment of joy arises, and we feel I am happy. A moment later, a feeling of frustration arises, and we feel I am frustrated. The feelings come and go like the weather, dependent on conditions, completely beyond our ultimate control. If we were our feelings, our identity would be shattering and reforming in every single moment. We see that the self is not our feelings. The third aggregate is perception. This is the faculty of the mind that recognizes, labels, and conceptualizes our experience. It is the part of the mind that sees a collection of colors and shapes and says, that is a tree, or hears a vibration and says, that is the sound of a bell. It is the process of making sense of raw sensory data. Are we our perceptions? Again, we see that perception is deeply conditioned and unreliable. It is dependent on the health of our sense organs, our past experiences, our cultural biases, and our present mood. Two people can witness the exact same event and have wildly different perceptions of what happened. If perception is so subjective and unstable, how can it be the core of a true and constant self? We see that the self is not our perceptions. The fourth aggregate is mental formations. This is a vast and complex category that includes all of our volitional activities, thoughts, opinions, beliefs, prejudices, moods, habits, and intentions. This is where most of us locate our sense of self. We identify strongly with our thoughts, our intellect, our moral compass, our personality traits. I am a kind person. I am an intelligent person. I believe in justice. But when we practice mindfulness, we watch this stream of mental formations and see that it, too, is an impersonal and uncontrollable flow. Thoughts arise unbidden and then vanish. Opinions change with new information. Moods are notoriously fickle. Beliefs we once held with absolute certainty can come to seem foolish later in life. This entire torrent of mental activity is just another changing process. Are we this chaotic inner chatter? We see that the self is not our mental formations. The fifth and final aggregate is consciousness. This is the raw faculty of knowing, the bare awareness that is present when there is seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, or thinking. This seems like the ultimate candidate for a self the pure, witnessing awareness behind it all. But upon closer inspection, consciousness is also seen to be dependent and impermanent. There is not one monolithic consciousness. There is seeing consciousness, which arises when an eye and a visible form come together. There is hearing consciousness, which arises when an ear and a sound come together. It does not exist independently. It arises in response to an object, and when the object is gone, that moment of consciousness is also gone. It flickers in and out of existence, moment by moment, completely dependent on conditions. So we see that even this bare awareness is not a solid, continuous self. After this thorough investigation, we are left with a startling conclusion. We have taken apart the entire engine of what we call a person, examined every component, and we have not found a driver in the seat. We have not found a CEO in the corner office. The self, that solid, independent entity we have spent our whole lives believing in, is nowhere to be found. Like the word chariot, which is just a convenient label for a functioning collection of wheels, an axle, and a frame, the word self is a convenient linguistic convention for a functioning, temporary collection of these 5 changing processes. It is a useful concept for navigating the world, but a profound source of suffering when mistaken for an ultimate reality. To see this is not to experience a terrifying void. It is to experience the greatest liberation imaginable. So much of our life's energy, our daily anxiety, is consumed by the project of ego defense. We defend our opinions as if our life depended on them. We feel deeply wounded by criticism because it feels like an attack on our very being. We are tormented by jealousy when someone else's self seems to be getting more praise or success than ourself. We live in a tightly defended fortress of I, me, and mine, and it is an exhausting, stressful, and lonely place to live. The insight into anatta dismantles this fortress. If there is no solid self to defend, who is there to be insulted? If there is no permanent entity to aggrandize, what is the point of a life driven by envy and competitive ambition? When someone criticizes a thought you have, you can see it not as an attack on you, but simply as a different perspective on a transient, mental event. A profound lightness and flexibility enters your life. You are no longer playing the exhausting game of self-preservation. The most beautiful fruit of this insight is the spontaneous arising of boundless compassion. The core illusion of the separate self is that there is a solid, hard boundary between me here and you out there. My happiness and my suffering are my business, and yours are yours. But anatta reveals this boundary to be porous and ultimately illusory. This is perfectly captured in the parable of the wave and the ocean. Imagine a single wave rising from the sea. It has a unique identity. It has its own shape, its own height, its own speed, its own life story. It travels across the surface of the water, and it may look at all the other waves and see them as separate from itself. It might feel proud of its height or ashamed of its smallness. And as it nears the shore, it might be filled with a terrible fear of its own death, of its own annihilation. But if that wave could, for a moment, look deeply into its own nature, it would realize that it is not, and never was, just a wave. Its fundamental reality, its very substance, is water. It is the ocean, expressing itself for a moment as a wave. When the wave realizes it is the ocean, the fear of dying becomes meaningless. It is not a separate entity that is being destroyed. It is simply the ocean changing its form. We are like that wave. We have our temporary, unique form, our personality, our story self, and we live in fear of its dissolution. But the teaching of anatta is the invitation to realize our true nature. We are not just the wave, We are the entire ocean of life. When this sense of radical interconnectedness dawns, the barrier between self and other becomes transparent. Your joy is not entirely separate from my joy. Your suffering is not entirely separate from my suffering. We are expressions of the same interdependent whole. From this realization, true compassion is born. It is not a feeling of pity for some unfortunate other. It is a deep resonance, a feeling with the other, based on the recognition of our shared nature. Harming another being becomes, in a very real sense, an act of self-harm. Helping another becomes an act of self-healing. We lose the small, cramped, and fearful prison of the isolated self, and in its place, we gain the vast, open, and liberating expanse of our interconnected existence. We are no longer a lonely noun, but a relational verb. And when the walls of this fictitious self dissolve, we look out and see for the first time not a world of separate objects, but a seamless, shimmering, interwoven tapestry of life, in which everything is profoundly and beautifully connected to everything else. As the solid walls of the separate self begin to dissolve, as we see through the illusion of a permanent, independent I, we are not left in a cold, empty void. Instead, we open our eyes to a reality far more vast, more vibrant, and more intimate than we ever imagined. The falling away of the separate self reveals its positive counterpart, the profound and beautiful truth of interconnectedness. This is the understanding that nothing, absolutely nothing, exists in isolation. Everything arises in dependence upon everything else. To be is to interbe. This principle, known in Buddhism as dependent origination, is not a complex metaphysical theory, but a simple, observable fact. This is because that is. This is not because that is not. When this arises, that arises. When this ceases, that ceases. It is a radical teaching of relationship, revealing that the entire universe is a single, seamless, interwoven tapestry, and every thread is intimately connected to every other thread. To truly feel this truth is to be cured of the sickness of loneliness and alienation forever. To make this tangible, let us engage in a simple contemplation. Take a single sheet of paper in your mind's eye. Ask yourself, what is this? On the surface, the answer is simple. It is a sheet of paper. But let us look more deeply, with the eyes of interbeing. For this paper to exist, there must first be a tree. But a tree cannot grow by itself. It needs sunshine. So the sun is in this sheet of paper. It needs water. So the clouds and the rain are here in this paper. The tree needed soil and minerals to grow. So the entire earth, with its long geological history, is present in this paper. Then, a logger had to cut the tree down. The logger needed parents to be born and food for breakfast to have the strength to work. So, the logger's parents and the wheat farmer who grew the grain for his bread are also in this sheet of paper. The log had to be transported to a mill, where workers turned it into pulp and then into paper. Their skill, their labor, their hopes and dreams for their families are all part of the paper's story. The paper was then shipped, perhaps across the ocean, in a truck, to a warehouse, then to a store, before it came to you. Think of all the hands, all the lives, all the processes that had to come together perfectly for this simple object to be in your presence. Now, try to remove all these non-paper elements. Take away the sun, take away the rain, take away the logger, the farmer, the truck driver, take away the earth itself. What is left? Nothing. The sheet of paper is empty of a separate, independent self. It is composed entirely of everything that is not paper. It interis with the entire cosmos, and so it is with us. You are not a separate, isolated being. Look deeply into yourself, and you will see the sun, the earth, your parents, your ancestors, your teachers, the farmers who grow your food. You are a convergence of countless causes and conditions. You interbe with everything. Ancient Buddhist cosmology offers a sublime and majestic metaphor to help us visualize this truth: the jeweled net of the god Indra. Imagine a vast, infinite net that stretches out in all directions, beyond space and time. At every single node where the threads of the net cross, there hangs a single, perfectly clear, multifaceted crystal jewel. The magical property of this net is that each jewel reflects all the other jewels in the entire web. If you look closely at the surface of any one jewel, you will see the shimmering reflections of every other jewel, each one distinct, stretching out to infinity. And within each of those reflections, you will see again the reflections of all the other jewels, and so on, in an endless, recursive, and breathtaking display of unity and diversity. We are each a jewel in this cosmic net. We have our own unique perspective, our own place, our own radiant beauty. Yet, we are not separate. We are held together by the invisible threads of causality and relationship, and the entirety of the cosmos is reflected within us. The state of every other jewel has an effect on the light that shines from our own. When we act with kindness, our jewel shines a little brighter, and that added brilliance is reflected in every other jewel in the net. When we act out of anger or greed, our jewel is clouded, and that dullness is shared across the entire web. This is not a poetic fantasy. It is a profound description of reality. It shows us that our smallest actions, our most private thoughts, have ripples that extend far beyond our immediate perception. We are never acting in a vacuum. We are always acting within this vast, interconnected field of being. This understanding is not just a beautiful philosophical concept. It has profound and practical ethical implications that can transform our relationship with the world. For instance, it completely dissolves the false and dangerous distinction between humanity and the environment. Our modern sense of alienation has led us to see nature as a resource to be exploited, a thing separate from us. The truth of interbeing reveals that we are nature. The air in the atmosphere becomes the breath in our lungs. The water in the rivers becomes the blood in our veins. The health of the forest is inseparable from the health of humanity. To pollute the planet is, therefore, not just an external problem. It is a direct act of self-harm, a poisoning of our own larger body. Environmentalism, seen through this lens, is no longer a political issue, but a fundamental spiritual practice, an expression of self-care on a planetary scale. Similarly, this insight transforms our approach to social justice and compassion. In a world viewed through the lens of the separate self, it is easy to create in-groups and out-groups. We can distance ourselves from the suffering of those in faraway lands or different circumstances, seeing their problems as separate from ours. But Indra's net shows us that this is an illusion. The poverty of a worker in a sweatshop is connected to the clothes we wear. The conflict in a distant nation is connected to the global economics that fuel our own society. We are all threads in the same garment of destiny. When we understand this, our motivation for action shifts. It is no longer an act of charity, which can sometimes carry a subtle sense of superiority, but an act of solidarity. We act to alleviate the suffering of others because we recognize their suffering as our own, their well-being as inseparable from our well-being. This understanding also helps us to move beyond a simplistic mindset of blame. When we see that a person's harmful action is not the product of an evil, isolated self, but is rather the result of 1,000 interwoven causes and conditions: their upbringing, their education, their trauma, their societal pressures, it does not excuse the harm, but it allows our heart to open with a more compassionate and systemic understanding. We see the person not as a monster, but as another jewel in the net that has become clouded, and our wish becomes not to punish, but to help them find a way to shine again. To live from the truth of interconnectedness is to be healed from the illusion of separation that is the deepest source of our fear. We are not lonely fragments in a hostile universe. We are an integral and beloved part of a vast, intelligent, and shimmering web of life. Our existence is a shared existence. Our pain is a shared pain. Our healing is a shared healing. Every breath we take is an exchange with the trees. Every meal we eat is a gift from the sun and the earth. Every interaction we have is a dance of mutual influence. And when this profound sense of connection becomes the ground upon which we stand, our whole way of relating to the world, and especially to the difficulties within it, begins to change. If my well-being is so intimately tied to yours, if your pain is reflected in me, and my pain is reflected in you, then how should I relate to you when you are the one causing me frustration or anger? How do I work with the difficult emotions that arise in this web of relationship? Understanding our profound interconnectedness paves the way for a revolutionary approach to conflict, an alchemy that can transform the heat of anger into the warmth of compassion. As we awaken to the profound truth of our interconnectedness, as we begin to feel the threads of Indra's net connecting us to all of life, our relationship with our own inner world must also transform. If we are all part of one another, then the anger, fear, and jealousy that arise within us are not just our private problems. They are disturbances in the shared web of being. A spiritual path that is grounded in reality does not promise an end to difficult emotions. Storms are a natural part of any climate, and so too are anger and fear, a natural part of the human heart. The path does not teach us how to stop the rain from falling. It teaches us how to build a shelter and, eventually, how to dance in the rain. The conventional ways we deal with these powerful energies are often deeply unskillful. The first is suppression. We feel a surge of anger, and because we believe it is unspiritual or bad, we push it down, clench our jaw, and pretend it isn't there. This is like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. It takes immense energy, and eventually, the suppressed emotion erupts with even greater force, often sideways, as chronic anxiety, depression, or a sudden, inexplicable rage. The second unskillful path is unrestrained expression. We feel the anger and immediately act it out, lashing out with sharp words or rash actions. This provides a momentary sense of release, but almost always leads to a cycle of regret, conflict, and deeper suffering for ourselves and others. The Buddha's way is a middle path, an alchemy of the heart that seeks neither to suppress nor to indulge, but to mindfully and compassionately transform. It is about learning to tame the inner dragon, not by slaying it, but by looking it in the eye with courage and kindness. The first step in this transformative process is the practice of mindful recognition. When a powerful emotion, like anger or fear, arises, our first instinct is to become it. Our entire identity is hijacked by the feeling, "I am angry." In this state of total identification, we have no freedom. We are simply a puppet of the emotion's energy. Mindfulness introduces a critical space. The practice is to train ourselves to recognize the emotion as an object of awareness, rather than as ourself. We learn to say, internally, with a calm and neutral tone, "Ah, anger is present in me," or "I am aware that the energy of fear has arisen." This simple shift is revolutionary. It moves us from being the actor in the center of the stage, consumed by the drama, to being the calm audience member, watching the play unfold. To ground this awareness, we bring our attention to the body. Where do you physically feel this emotion? Is it a burning heat in your face and chest? A tight knot in your stomach? A frantic, buzzing energy in your limbs? By focusing on these raw, physical sensations, we stay with the direct experience of the emotion as pure energy, and we avoid getting swept up in the mental story, the justifications, the blame, the catastrophic thinking that usually fuels the fire. We are simply holding our gaze on the inner dragon, acknowledging its presence without either attacking it or running from it. The second step is perhaps the most radical, for it goes against all our conditioning. It is the practice of embracing the difficult emotion with compassion. A beautiful teaching from Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh is to treat our anger like a crying baby. When a mother hears her baby crying, a good mother does not get angry at the baby or lock it in another room. She immediately stops what she is doing, goes to the baby and picks it up. She holds it tenderly, she cradles it, she whispers soothing sounds. Her compassionate embrace doesn't necessarily stop the crying right away, but it surrounds the baby's distress with a much larger energy of love, safety, and care. And this is exactly how we can learn to work with our own inner turmoil. When the baby of our anger is crying out, we can learn to pick it up. We can use the energy of our mindfulness to tenderly embrace the emotion. This can be a physical practice, placing a hand gently on your heart or your belly, where you feel the storm raging, and breathing with it. We send our breath, our warmth, our acceptance to that tight, pained place inside. We whisper to our anger, "I see you. I know you are suffering. I am here for you, and I will take care of you." This is not an act of condoning anger or giving it permission to run wild. It is an act of profound self-compassion, a recognition that behind every surge of anger or fear, there is a deep well of suffering. By tending to the suffering, by soothing the crying child within, we stop the cycle of inner violence and allow the raw energy of the emotion to calm down. Once the initial intensity of the storm has been soothed by our mindful and compassionate presence, we can move to the third step, deep investigation. Strong emotions are not random events. They are messengers from our inner world, often carrying vital information. When the emotion is no longer screaming at us, we can begin to listen to its whisper. We can ask our anger, with genuine curiosity, "My dear anger, what are you trying to tell me? What boundary has been crossed? What deep hurt or fear lies beneath your fiery surface?" We often find that anger is a secondary emotion, a protective mask for a more vulnerable feeling like sadness, shame, or fear. We can ask our fear, "What do you believe is threatened right now? What is the story you are telling me about the future?" By engaging with our emotions in this way, we shift from being their victim to being their wise student. We learn about our own triggers, our ingrained patterns, our unmet needs, and our unhealed wounds. This insight is the key to lasting freedom. It helps us to understand the roots of our emotional storms, so that we can begin the work of healing the underlying conditions, ensuring that future storms are less frequent and less intense. The power of this wise and compassionate non-reaction is perfectly illustrated in a story from the Buddha's life. A man, furious with the Buddha's teachings, came to confront him and began shouting a torrent of insults. The Buddha listened patiently and silently until the man had finished. Then he asked him a simple question. "My friend, if you prepare a gift for someone and you offer it to them, but they do not accept it, to whom does the gift then belong?" The angry man, taken aback, replied, "Well, it would still belong to me." The Buddha smiled gently and said, "Exactly so. You have offered me the gift of your insults and your anger. I choose not to accept it." In that moment, the Buddha demonstrated the ultimate mastery of his inner world. He did not suppress anything. He was fully aware of the man's anger. He did not lash out. His heart was filled with compassion for the man's suffering. He simply created a space of wisdom and refused to take ownership of the other man's poison. This is the freedom that this practice offers us. The freedom to choose our response. The freedom not to participate in the cycles of negativity. The freedom to remain at peace, even in the face of hostility. This three-step process: mindful recognition, compassionate embrace, and wise investigation is a profound technology for the heart. It provides a clear and practical path for transforming our most challenging inner states. It is the way we learn to stop fighting the dragons of our own mind and instead learn from their immense energy and power. It is a journey from being a reactive slave to our emotions to becoming a creative and compassionate master of our inner world. We learn that every difficult emotion is an opportunity for practice, a chance to deepen our self-awareness and our capacity for love. And as we become more adept at tending to the inevitable weeds that sprout in our inner garden, we naturally want to spend more time engaged in the joyful work of actively cultivating the most beautiful flowers. Beyond just dealing with the negative, the path calls us to the deliberate and boundless cultivation of the positive states of heart and mind. Having learned to skillfully and compassionately work with the inevitable storms of anger and fear that pass through our minds, we now turn to a more proactive and deeply joyful aspect of the path. It is not enough to simply manage the negative. A life of true flourishing requires the deliberate and heartfelt cultivation of the positive. If working with difficult emotions is like learning to navigate a storm, this next practice is like actively changing the inner climate, seeding the clouds so that gentle rains of kindness fall more often, and the sun of a peaceful heart shines more brightly. This practice is the cultivation of what are known as the four immeasurables, or the Brahma-viharastha, divine abodes. They are four boundless states of heart-loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity that, when developed, become the very ground of our being. They are not fleeting emotions to be hoped for, but radiant qualities of mind to be trained and stabilized through dedicated practice. There is an old story that perfectly illustrates the wisdom of this approach. A man with very sensitive feet complained that the whole world was rough and stony, making it impossible for him to walk without pain. He came up with a grand plan. He would devote his life to covering the entire surface of the earth with soft leather, so that he could walk anywhere in comfort. A wise person heard of his plan and offered a much simpler solution. Instead of trying to cover the whole world, the sage suggested, "Why don't you simply cut a small piece of leather and fashion a pair of shoes for yourself?" The four immeasurables are these shoes for the mind. We cannot control the external world. We cannot guarantee that life will always be smooth, that others will always be kind, or that circumstances will always be pleasant. To try to do so is an endless and exhausting task. But what we can do is cultivate an inner state of resilience, warmth, and profound balance. We can fashion for ourselves a heart so spacious and loving that we can walk through the rough and stony terrain of this world with grace, courage, and a deep, unshakable peace. The first of these divine abodes, the foundation upon which the others are built, is metta, or loving kindness. Metta is often translated as love, but it is not the sentimental, romantic, or conditional love that we usually associate with that word. It is a universal, unconditional, and unselfish goodwill. It is the simple, heartfelt wish for all beings, without exception, to be happy and to have the causes of true happiness. It is a gentle friendliness, not just towards others, but towards existence itself. It is a fundamental warmth of the heart that radiates outward in all directions. The practice of cultivating metta is a systematic training of the heart to open in ever-widening circles. And it must, absolutely must, begin with ourselves. We cannot offer a drink from an empty cup. If our own heart is a desert of self-criticism and judgment, we have no living water to offer anyone else. So, the meditation begins by turning this warmth inward. We find a quiet posture, and we gently repeat phrases directed at our own being. May I be safe. May I be healthy, in body and mind. May I be happy and truly content. May I live with ease. We offer these phrases not as a demand, but as a gentle, loving wish, allowing the feeling of friendliness to permeate our own being, especially the parts of ourselves we find it hard to love. Once we have established a baseline of this self-kindness, we expand the circle. We bring to mind a benefactor or a dear friend, someone for whom it is easy to feel love and appreciation. We hold their image in our mind and extend the same wishes to them. May you be safe. May you be happy. We let our heart overflow with genuine goodwill for them. Then, we widen the circle again to include a neutral person, someone we see often but have no strong feelings about, like a person at the post office or a neighbor we barely know. We offer them the same sincere wishes, training our heart to break its habit of indifference. The most transformative step is next. We bring to mind a difficult person, someone who has hurt us, or with whom we have a conflict. This can be challenging. The practice is not to condone their harmful actions or to force ourselves to like them. It is the heroic act of recognizing that they too are suffering, and that their harmful actions likely come from their own inner pain and confusion. With this understanding, we try to offer them a simple wish. May you be free from the anger that causes you to suffer. May you, too, find a way to be happy. This act begins to dissolve the poison of resentment in our own heart, which is a profound act of self-liberation. Finally, we radiate metta outwards in all directions: north, south, east, and west. Above and below to all beings everywhere, large and small, near and far, seen and unseen. May all beings be happy. We rest in this boundless, universal field of warm-heartedness. The second divine abode is karuna, or compassion. If metta is the wish for all beings to be happy, karuna is its natural partner, the sincere wish for all beings to be free from suffering. Karuna is the trembling of the heart in the face of pain. It is what metta becomes when it encounters dukkha. It is not pity, which often contains a subtle sense of distance and superiority, a feeling of you, poor thing, down there. True compassion is a feeling with another, a recognition of our shared vulnerability to pain, loss, and sorrow. It is empathy combined with the noble aspiration to help, to alleviate the suffering if we can. Without the foundation of metta's warmth and friendliness, compassion can be crushing. It can lead to what is now called empathy, fatigue, or burnout, where we become so overwhelmed by the world's suffering that we shut down. But when our heart has been strengthened and made resilient by the practice of metta, we can hold the reality of suffering in a vast, warm embrace without being destroyed by it. The practice of cultivating karuna involves intentionally bringing to mind the suffering of others, a sick friend, a lonely elder, victims of war or injustice, or the silent suffering of animals. We allow ourselves to feel the reality of their pain, and we hold it in our heart, breathing in their suffering and breathing out a prayer of peace and relief. May you be free from this pain. May you find peace and healing. This practice dissolves our self-preoccupation and connects us to the heart of the world. The third divine abode is mudita, or sympathetic joy. In many ways, this is the most challenging of the first three qualities for people in a competitive culture to cultivate. Mudita is the practice of feeling genuine, unselfish joy in the happiness, success, and good fortune of others. It is the direct and powerful antidote to the poisons of jealousy and envy. Envy arises from the mistaken, scarcity-based belief that happiness is a limited resource, that if someone else gets a large slice of the pie, there is less left for us. This mindset creates a constant state of comparison, resentment, and dissatisfaction. Mudita, by contrast, arises from a mindset of abundance. It recognizes that joy is not a zero-sum game. In fact, it is infinitely expandable. The happiness of another person does not diminish our own. It adds to the total happiness in the world. The practice of mudita involves deliberately bringing to mind someone who is experiencing joy or success. It could be a friend who has achieved a lifelong goal, a colleague who received a promotion, or even a stranger laughing with delight in a park. Instead of allowing the flicker of comparison or envy to arise, we consciously choose to share in their joy. We say to ourselves, "How wonderful for them. I am so happy that they are happy. May their joy and good fortune continue and increase." This practice is a powerful purification of the heart, freeing us from the self-inflicted torment of envy and allowing us to celebrate the goodness that we see in the world. The fourth and final divine abode is upekkha, or equanimity. This is the crown and the container of the other three. Upekkha is a state of profound balance, serenity, and unshakable peace. It is the ability to meet the ever-changing circumstances of life, the famous 8 worldly winds of pleasure and pain, praise and blame, gain and loss, fame and disrepute, with a steady and spacious mind. Equanimity is not coldness or indifference. This is a crucial distinction. Its counterfeit, indifference, is a dull, checked-out state of not caring. True equanimity is a radiant and engaged state, born of deep wisdom. It is the understanding of the laws of karma and impermanence. We see that all beings are the inheritors of their own actions, and that happiness and sorrow arise and pass away according to a vast web of causes and conditions. This allows us to love others deeply and offer them our kindness, compassion, and joy without being attached to the results of our efforts. We can care profoundly, yet not be thrown off balance when things don't go the way we want. Upekkha is the vast, open sky that allows all the weather patterns of life, the sunshine of joy, the storms of grief, the winds of change to pass through it, without the sky itself being stained or disturbed. It is this stable, boundless heart that can hold the whole world with a wise and unwavering love. To dwell in these 4 states is to live in the most beautiful home imaginable. They are a complete education for the human heart, moving it from a state of contraction, fear, and reactivity to one of expansion, courage, and profound peace. They are the shoes that protect our feet, the inner refuge that keeps us safe. And when our heart has been trained to be this open, this resilient, and this boundlessly kind, even the most challenging and complex arena of human life, or intimate relationships with family, friends, and partner ceases to be a potential battleground and becomes instead the most fertile field imaginable for our practice. With a heart that has been trained in the boundless states of loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, we are now ready to bring this expanded awareness into one of the most challenging and rewarding arenas of human life: our relationships. For most of us, our interactions with family, friends, partners, and children are the source of our greatest happiness, and, all too often, our most profound suffering. We experience love and connection, but also misunderstanding, conflict, and hurt. It is easy to think of these relational difficulties as obstacles on our spiritual path, as messy distractions from the real work of meditation and inner peace. But the wisdom of this path invites a radical reframing. Our relationships are not an obstacle to the path. They are the path. The living room, the dinner table, the shared bedroom. This is the true monastery. Our partners, our parents, our children, they are our most intimate and demanding spiritual teachers. It is precisely in the friction of our relationships that our attachments, our fears, our ego's defenses, and our unskillful habits are most clearly revealed. Every conversation, every disagreement, every moment of connection is a precious, unrepeatable opportunity to practice, to grow, and to wake up. To engage in our relationships as a spiritual practice requires specific skills, chief among them being the arts of deep listening, seeing the other as a mirror, and the profound practice of forgiveness. The first and most fundamental skill for transforming our relationships is the practice of deep, compassionate listening. We spend so much of our lives engaged in conversation, but we so rarely truly listen. Most of the time, we are engaged in what could be called autobiographical listening. We are not listening to understand. We are listening for our cue to speak. We listen just enough to formulate our rebuttal, to offer our unsolicited advice, to top their story with one of our own, or to judge what they are saying against our own beliefs. This kind of listening is all about me. Deep listening, in the Buddhist tradition, is the opposite. It is the practice of listening with only one intention: to help the other person suffer less. When we listen in this way, we offer the other person the rare and precious gift of our full, mindful, non-judgmental presence. We set aside our own agenda, our own need to be right or to fix things, and we create a safe space for them to express themselves fully. We listen not just to their words, but to the feelings behind the words. We listen for their joys and for their sorrows. This in itself is a profound act of healing. To be truly heard, to be seen and understood without judgment, is one of the deepest longings of the human heart. Paired with deep listening is the practice of loving speech. As we have seen, this is the art of using our words to nourish and support, rather than to wound or blame. In the context of our closest relationships, this means making a conscious effort to water the flowers in the other person. It is easy to fall into a habit of focusing on our partners' or family members' faults, on what irritates us. The practice of loving speech is to deliberately and frequently acknowledge their positive qualities. It is expressing our appreciation for their presence in our life, thanking them for small acts of kindness, and reminding them of their strengths and their beauty. This creates a positive environment where both people feel seen and valued. Loving speech also means learning to express our own difficulties and needs with skill and kindness. Instead of using blaming language like, "You never help around the house," which immediately puts the other person on the defensive, we can learn to speak from our own experience. When I see the dishes piled up after a long day, I feel overwhelmed and unsupported. This communicates the same information, but it does so in a way that invites understanding rather than escalating conflict. Deep listening and loving speech, practiced together, can transform a relationship from a battleground of competing egos into a sanctuary of mutual support and understanding. The second crucial skill is learning to see the other person as a mirror. Inevitably, in any long-term relationship, there will be things about the other person's behavior that trigger a strong negative reaction in us. It could be their messiness, their way of talking, their political opinions, or their habits. Our usual reaction is to focus all our energy on them, on how they are wrong and how they need to change. This is a recipe for endless conflict. The practice of the mirror invites us to turn our attention inward in these moments of intense irritation. It is based on the psychological insight that the things that bother us most in others are often the very qualities that we have denied, repressed, or refused to look at in ourselves, what is sometimes called our shadow. When we feel a disproportionately strong surge of anger or judgment towards another, it is a sign that one of our own unhealed wounds has been touched. The practice is to pause and ask, with genuine curiosity, what exactly is it about this that is pushing my buttons so intensely? Is there some small part of me that is also like this, which I am afraid to admit? What fear or insecurity in me is being activated right now? Perhaps their perceived laziness mirrors our own deep-seated fear of not being productive enough. Perhaps their perceived need for attention mirrors our own unacknowledged loneliness. This practice is not about absolving the other person of their behavior, but about using our reaction as a precious clue for our own inner work. When we practice in this way, the difficult people in our lives are transformed. They cease to be our antagonists and become our most powerful, unwitting teachers. They are mirrors showing us exactly where we are stuck, exactly where we have more healing to do. We can even come to feel a strange sense of gratitude towards them, for they are pointing the way to our own liberation. The third and perhaps most healing skill is the practice of forgiveness. In any long relationship, there will be hurts. We will hurt others, and they will hurt us, often unintentionally. If these hurts are not processed and released, they accumulate in the heart as resentment, bitterness, and grievances, forming a thick wall that blocks love and connection. The story of the two Zen monks and the woman at the river illustrates this perfectly. One monk breaks the rules to carry a young woman across a swollen river. Miles down the road, the other monk is still fuming, scolding him for what he did. The first monk looks at him in surprise and says, "I put that woman down on the riverbank miles ago. Why are you still carrying her?" This is the nature of resentment. The event is long over, but we continue to harm ourselves in the present moment by replaying the story in our minds. We are the ones still carrying the heavy burden. Forgiveness, in the Buddhist sense, is the act of putting that burden down. It is crucial to understand what forgiveness is not. It is not condoning the harmful action or pretending it was okay. It is not necessarily forgetting what happened. And it does not always mean reconciling with the person, especially if they are likely to continue causing harm. Forgiveness is primarily an internal act, a gift of freedom that we give to ourselves. It is the conscious decision to let go of the consuming poison of anger and resentment, not for their sake, but for our own. It is the reclaiming of our own inner peace. And often, the most difficult person to forgive is ourselves. We carry around deep shame and guilt for past mistakes. We must learn to offer the same mindful acceptance and compassion to our own past selves, recognizing that we acted as we did based on the level of wisdom and suffering we had at that time. These three skills, communicating with presence, using others as a mirror for self-knowledge, and the courageous act of forgiveness, are the keys to transforming our relationships into a living, breathing spiritual practice. They invite us to see every interaction, not as a test of our patience, but as a lesson from the heart. They teach us that the goal is not to find a perfect partner or to create a perfect family, but to bring a perfect quality of mindful, loving attention to the beautifully imperfect relationships we already have. And as we learn to find this sacred space for practice in the midst of the complexities of our personal lives, we discover that this same capacity can be extended even further into the bustling, demanding, and often stressful environments of our daily work and our life in the modern world. Having explored the path of transforming our relationships into a spiritual practice, we now arrive at a crucial and wonderfully practical question. How do we integrate these profound teachings into the frantic, demanding, and often overwhelming reality of our modern lives? There is a common and understandable misconception that a deep spiritual life requires a withdrawal from the world, a quiet monastery on a remote mountain, a silent retreat lasting for months, a life free from the pressures of work, family, and finance. For the vast majority of us, this is neither a possible nor a desirable reality. The true challenge and the profound beauty of this path is not to find peace by escaping the world, but to discover an unshakable peace right in the heart of it. It is the art of learning to hear the silence that underlies the noise. The goal is to transform the very fabric of our everyday lives, the office cubicle, the morning commute, the kitchen sink, the supermarket queue, into our practice hall. The metropolis itself can become our monastery. This is not about adding more to our already overloaded schedules, but about transforming the quality of our attention within the life we already have. The foundation for this integrated practice is the establishment of a small, consistent anchor of formal meditation. Before we can expect to be mindful in the midst of a chaotic day, we must first train the mind in a controlled environment. This does not mean you must sit for an hour every day. That is an unrealistic goal for most, and setting it often leads to failure and discouragement. The invitation is to start small, with a profound sense of kindness towards yourself. Perhaps it is just 10 minutes each morning. Perhaps it is only 5. The consistency of the practice is far more important than its duration. This dedicated time is like charging the battery of your mindfulness. It is where you sit down, quiet the external distractions, and practice the core skill of returning, again and again, to the anchor of your breath. It is a sacred appointment you keep with yourself, a moment to create a small island of silence in the ocean of your day. By doing this, you build the mental muscle of awareness and create a reservoir of peace that you can draw upon when you step back into the flow of your life. Find a quiet corner, set a timer, and give yourself the gift of simply being, without any agenda other than to be present with yourself. This small act of stillness will become the anchor for your entire day. With this anchor of formal practice in place, we can begin the joyful work of weaving mindfulness into the very fabric of our ordinary moments. Our days are full of in-between times, small pockets of waiting that we usually fill with restless distraction, most often by pulling out our phones. These moments are golden opportunities for practice. When you are stopped at a red light, instead of feeling impatience, let the red light be a bell of mindfulness. Release your tight grip on the steering wheel. Feel your back against the seat. Take 3 conscious, deep breaths. This is a red light meditation. When you are waiting in line at the coffee shop, instead of scrolling through news feeds, feel your feet planted firmly on the ground. Notice the sounds and smells around you without judgment. Listen to the murmur of conversations as if it were music. This is a waiting in line meditation. Before you take the first sip of your morning coffee or tea, pause. Hold the cup in your hands and feel its warmth. See the steam rising. Inhale its aroma. Then, take the first sip with your full, undivided attention, truly tasting it. In these small ways, we transform moments of mindless waiting into moments of rich, alive presence. This practice can extend even to the tasks we find most tedious, our daily chores. The Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh, famously said, "When you are washing the dishes, you should just be washing the dishes." This simple instruction contains a profound teaching. Usually, when we do chores, our body is in one place, while our mind is a million miles away, lost in resentful thoughts about the past or anxious plans for the future. We rush through the task just to get it over with. The mindful approach is to turn the chore into a sensory meditation. When you wash the dishes, feel the warmth of the water on your hands. Notice the slippery texture of the soap. See the light reflecting off the clean plate. Hear the sound of the water. Your purpose is not just to get clean dishes. Your purpose is to be fully alive during the time you are washing them. The same can be done with any task. Feel the rhythm of your body as you sweep the floor. Notice the crisp folds and the soft texture of the clothes as you do the laundry. By bringing our full attention to these simple, repetitive actions, we infuse them with a sense of dignity and peace. They cease to be burdens and become opportunities for grounding and presence. Nowhere is this practice more needed or more transformative than in the pressure cooker of the modern workplace. We can begin with our commute. Instead of fueling ourselves with frustration and road rage, we can use this time to practice. We can listen to calming music or an inspiring talk. We can practice mindful breathing in the midst of a traffic jam, choosing peace over anger. Our desk can become our meditation cushion. In a culture that glorifies multitasking, we can take a radical vow to practice single tasking. When you are writing an email, just write the email with your full attention. When you are in a meeting, truly listen to what is being said, rather than planning what you are going to say next. This practice not only reduces stress, it dramatically increases focus and effectiveness. Most powerfully, we can learn to use the feeling of stress itself as a bell of mindfulness. When you feel that familiar tightening in your shoulders, that quickening of your heart, that sense of being overwhelmed by a deadline or a difficult colleague, let that be your signal to pause. Before you react, before you send that angry email, before you speak that sharp word, just stop. Take 3 deep, conscious breaths. Feel your feet on the floor. This simple act creates a crucial space between the stimulus and your response. It is in this sacred pause that you reclaim your freedom. It is in this space that you can choose to respond with wisdom and clarity rather than reacting from a place of blind habit. By embracing these practices, we slowly dissolve the artificial boundary we have created between our spiritual life and our real life. We learn that peace is not something we have to go away to find. It is a quality of being that we can cultivate in any moment, regardless of our external circumstances. Life itself, in all of its messy, beautiful, demanding, and mundane detail, becomes our meditation. We are no longer waiting for the perfect conditions to practice. We are no longer waiting for a special time or place to finally feel at peace. We are learning, breath by breath, step by step, how to find our monastery right here, in the heart of the bustling metropolis of our own lives. And as we become more and more adept at being present with the simple reality of our daily experience, a new kind of seeing can begin to dawn, a perception that goes beyond the surface of things and begins to inquire into their very nature. This opens the door to understanding one of the most subtle, profound, and powerful concepts in Buddhist thought, the liberating truth of emptiness. As we bring the quality of mindful presence into the fabric of our daily lives, our perception of the world begins to shift in subtle and profound ways. We see the constant arising and passing of phenomena. We feel our deep interconnection with all of life. This leads us to the pinnacle of Buddhist wisdom, an insight so profound that it can feel vertiginous, and a concept so easily misunderstood that its very name can be frightening. This is the teaching of sunyata, or emptiness. To the Western ear, the word emptiness often conjures images of a cold, meaningless void, a nihilistic abyss where nothing matters. It sounds like a denial of life, a philosophy of nothingness. But in the context of this path, the meaning is the precise opposite. Sunyata is not a bleak absence. It is a radiant and dynamic presence. It is not the denial of existence, but the denial of a specific, impossible way of existing. It is the key that unlocks ultimate freedom, the very ground of creativity, compassion, and boundless potential. Emptiness is the positive expression of the truths we have already uncovered. Because all things are impermanent and in a constant state of flux, anicca, and because no thing possesses a solid, separate, independent self, anatta, all things are therefore empty of a fixed, intrinsic, stand-alone nature. It is the ultimate logical and experiential conclusion of our investigation into reality. To grasp this, let us return to a simple object, like a teacup, on the level of conventional, everyday reality. It is, of course, a cup. We can pick it up, fill it with tea, and drink from it. The teaching of emptiness does not negate this functional reality, but it invites us to inquire into the cup's ultimate nature. We ask, where is the essential, inherent cup-ness of this object? Let us search for it. Is the cup's essence in the clay from which it is made? No. The clay was once part of the earth, a mixture of minerals and water, and before that, it was part of ancient mountains that eroded over millennia. The clay itself is empty of a separate clay self. Is the cupness in its shape, its form? No. The form was given to it by the hands of the potter, the spinning of the wheel, the vision in the potter's mind. The shape is a temporary condition, dependent on 1,000 other factors. Is its essence in the hard, glazed surface? No. This is a result of the intense fire in a kiln, a chemical transformation of minerals, again, dependent on external causes. Is its essence, then, in its function of holding tea? No. Its function is a concept that we project onto it. To a small insect, it might be a mountain. To a creature in need of shelter, it might be a cave. Its function is relative to a user and a purpose. So, we have looked at the cup from every angle, and we cannot find any single, independent, permanent quality that we can call cup. The cup is completely empty of any intrinsic standalone existence. This is the first half of the insight. And because it is empty of a separate self, it is therefore completely full of the entire universe. The cup is full of the earth, the rain, and the sun that allowed the clay to form. It is full of the potter, their ancestors, their culture, and their skill. It is full of the fire, the technology of the kiln, the history of ceramics. It is full of the entire web of causes and conditions that had to converge in just this way for the cup to be. Emptiness and interconnectedness are two sides of the same coin. An entity is empty of a separate self, and therefore it is full of everything else. The same is true for you. You are empty of a solid, independent you-ness, and because of that, you are full of your parents, your society, the food you eat, the air you breathe, the ideas you've learned. You are full of the entire cosmos. This profound wisdom is most famously and concisely expressed in the Heart Sutra. In this short text, the great embodiment of compassion, the Bodhisattva, Avalokiteshvara, is in a state of deep meditation and realizes the nature of emptiness. He then declares the most famous line in all of Buddhist literature: "Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form." Let us unpack this. Form is emptiness means that all forms, everything we can perceive with our senses, bodies, trees, mountains, this entire physical world, when we investigate them deeply, are found to be empty of a separate, intrinsic nature, just like the teacup. Emptiness is form is the crucial and even more profound second half. It means that emptiness is not some blank, otherworldly void that exists apart from our world. Emptiness is the very nature of this world of form. It is because reality is fundamentally open, fluid, and empty of fixed essence that it is able to manifest as this incredible, vibrant, and ever-changing display of shapes, colors, sounds, and textures. Emptiness is not the negation of form. It is the very potential that allows all forms to arise, dance for a time, and pass away. The sutra then performs a great, liberating unraveling. It goes through all the categories of Buddhist psychology we have studied: the 5 aggregates, the sense organs and their objects. Even the 4 Noble Truths declares that from this ultimate perspective, they too are empty. This is not to say they are invalid. They are vital, skillful tools for the relative journey. But the teaching is to warn us against clinging to them as solid, absolute dogmas. Even the path itself must ultimately be let go of when we reach the other shore. The Heart Sutra culminates in a great mantra, a chant of liberation that is not a plea to a deity, but a triumphant celebration of awakening. Gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisvaha. This can be translated as gone, gone, gone beyond, completely and thoroughly gone beyond, awakening. So be it. It is a call to action, an encouragement for our own hearts. It is telling us to go beyond our ordinary dualistic way of seeing the world. Go beyond the concepts of self and other, birth and death, success and failure. Go beyond all our fixed ideas and mental prisons, all the way to the other shore of profound peace and freedom. It is the cry of a heart that has realized its own boundless, open, and empty nature. To live from this understanding is to experience a freedom that touches every aspect of our lives. Its most immediate effect is the dissolving of rigid labels. We live in a world of harsh, black and white judgments. We label ourselves and others as good or bad, a success or a failure. These labels create a heavy, concrete reality that traps us. When we understand emptiness, we see that no person or situation has a single, fixed, inherent nature. A person who acts unskillfully is not an inherently bad person. They are a complex, changing process of causes and conditions who is currently suffering. A failure is not a permanent stain on our character. It is a temporary outcome, a confluence of events that is rich with lessons and is already changing. This insight allows us to meet ourselves, others, and life's circumstances with incredible flexibility, curiosity, and compassion. The world ceases to be a collection of solid, threatening nouns and becomes a dance of relational, changing verbs. This insight is also the ultimate antidote to dogmatism and fundamentalism. So much human conflict arises from people clinging with absolute certainty to their particular set of beliefs, be they religious, political, or philosophical. The wisdom of emptiness reveals that all concepts, all views, all maps of reality are, in the end, just that, maps. They are useful tools, but they are not the territory itself. They are empty of ultimate, absolute truth. When we understand this, we can still use our views and values to navigate the world, but we hold them with a new lightness. We are less likely to become arrogant in our rightness and more open to listening to and learning from the perspectives of others. This fosters humility, dialogue, and peace. Furthermore, if nothing has a fixed and predetermined nature, then everything is imbued with infinite potential. Reality is not a finished, static product. It is an open field of possibility. A relationship that seems broken can be healed. A personal flaw that seems intractable can be transformed. An ending is never just an ending. It is always the precondition for a new beginning. This perspective allows us to engage with life not with a sense of grim finality, but with a spirit of creativity, hope, and even playfulness. Finally, and most importantly, emptiness is the ultimate ground of compassion. As long as we believe in a solid, separate self, our compassion will always be limited. It will be an act of a superior self, helping an inferior other. There will always be a subtle distance. But when the insight into emptiness reveals the illusory nature of the boundary between self and other, true compassion flowers. We realize that helping another is not an act of charity, but an act of sanity. It is the whole recognizing and tending to a part of itself. The hand, seeing a thorn in the foot, does not ask, "Am I obligated to help this separate foot?" It simply, naturally, and immediately acts to remove the thorn, because it understands that the suffering of the foot is its own suffering. Sunyata reveals that we are all part of one body, one metabolism of existence. True compassion is the natural, unobstructed movement of love in a field that is recognized as being indivisibly whole. Emptiness, then, is not a cold void. It is the warm, beating heart of the universe. It is the open hand that has finally let go of its fearful clenching. It is the open sky that has room for every cloud, every storm, every star. It is the ultimate release from our deepest attachment, the attachment to the illusion that things are separate, solid, and here to stay. And after this profound and vertiginous journey to the heart of reality itself, where do we land? We land with new eyes and an open heart, exactly where we have always been, in the simple, miraculous, and ever-present reality of this very moment. We have traveled an immense distance on this inner journey. We began in the dis-ease of the modern world, diagnosed the universal condition of dukkha, and identified its source as the unquenchable thirst of tanha. We were given the physician's prescription of the Four Noble Truths and walked, step by step, along the Eightfold Path, cultivating our wisdom, our ethical conduct, and our mental discipline. We have gazed into the profound nature of reality itself, seeing the relentless flow of impermanence, the liberating truth of no self, and the luminous, interconnected emptiness of all things. After this epic journey through the highest peaks and deepest valleys of the spirit, a question naturally arises. Where have we finally arrived? The beautiful, paradoxical, and profoundly simple answer is that we have arrived exactly where we began, but for the very first time, we are able to truly see it. we have come home. The spiritual path is not a journey to a distant celestial destination. It is a journey to this very spot, to this very breath, to this very moment. In the Zen tradition, the entrance to this reality is called the gateless gate. It is a gate that has no doors and no walls, because we were never outside of it. The kingdom of heaven is not in the sky, it is within you. Nirvana is not a future promise, it is the peace that is available when the fires of craving are extinguished, right here and now. The entire, intricate map of the path has only ever been designed to lead us back to the simple, radical, and life-altering miracle of the present moment. Most of our human suffering is rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding of time. Our mind, a magnificent but often unruly tool, has the ability to leave the present moment at will. We spend the vast majority of our lives as time travelers, lost in one of two phantom realms, the past or the future. We are haunted by the ghosts of the past. We exist in a state of constant mental replay, relitigating old arguments, nursing old grievances, indulging in nostalgic longings for the good old days, or being tormented by the shame of past mistakes. But where is this past? Can you touch it? Can you hold it? It exists only as a thought, a memory trace arising in the mind, right now. It has no substance, no independent reality. To live in the past is to be a phantom in our own lives, missing the one thing that is actually real. Equally, we are seduced by the mirage of the future. We live in a state of constant projection, planning, worrying, and fantasizing. We are driven by the if-only model of happiness. I will finally be at peace if I get that promotion, if I find the perfect partner, if I can retire, if I can just get through this week. But the future, like the past, is only a thought. It is a mental construction, a possibility that has not yet occurred. It has no reality. We sacrifice the tangible, concrete reality of today for a fantasy of tomorrow that may never arrive as we imagine it. This is the tyranny of time. The refuge from this tyranny, the only place where life actually unfolds, is the now. Your heart is beating now. The breath is flowing now. The sounds entering your ears are happening now. To return to the present moment is to return from the land of ghosts and mirages. It is to finally come home to your life. This return to the present also transforms our understanding of happiness. The world's model of happiness is based on seeking and acquiring. It is a model of becoming. It tells us that happiness is an external commodity, something to be achieved through pleasure, possessions, or status. As we have seen, this is the hedonic treadmill, an endless and exhausting pursuit of fleeting pleasures that never deliver lasting satisfaction. True joy, the kind of deep and resilient well-being spoken of on this path, is not found in becoming, but in being. It is a joy that arises not from getting something from the outside, but from touching the peace that is already present on the inside. In the states of deep meditation, two qualities of this inner joy are revealed. The first is piti, a sense of zest, rapture, or uplifting energy. It can feel like a bubbling up of delight from a deep inner spring. The second is sukha, a more sustained and tranquil state of happiness and profound contentment. It is a deep sense of all is well, a quiet and unshakable gladness. The profound discovery is that these qualities are not dependent on external circumstances. They are intrinsic potentials of a mind that is at peace. This is the happiness of the empty cup, which, being empty of the need for anything, is full of the richness of the universe. It is the joy of letting go of the stressful project of becoming happy and discovering the simple, profound contentment of just being here. With this new way of seeing, the world itself is transfigured. There is a famous Zen progression that describes this journey. Before I began my practice, mountains were mountains and rivers were rivers. While I was practicing, mountains were no longer mountains and rivers were no longer rivers. But now that I have found peace, mountains are once again mountains and rivers are once again rivers. In the beginning, we see the world literally on a purely surface level. As we engage in the practice, we begin to deconstruct reality. We use the tools of wisdom to see that the mountain is not a solid thing, but a dynamic, impermanent process of interconnected causes and conditions. We see its emptiness. This is the analytical stage, but the journey does not end there. We return to the world, but with our vision transformed. We look at the mountain, and it is once again a mountain, but we see it with new eyes. We see its form and its emptiness simultaneously. We see its magnificent, ordinary suchness. We are no longer fooled by its apparent solidity, but we can fully appreciate its rugged beauty. The world becomes re-enchanted, not with superstition, but with the miracle of its own ordinary existence. There is a story of a poor man who left home to wander the world in search of a priceless jewel that he had heard would solve all his problems. He traveled for decades, enduring immense hardship, poverty, and disappointment. He searched in every land, in every city, but he never found it. Finally, old and exhausted, he returned to his home village. A wise friend from his childhood came to see him. Hearing his sad story, the friend smiled and said, "My dear friend, do you remember that night, many years ago, before you left? You were so distraught. I had a small jewel, and wanting to help you, I secretly sewed it into the lining of the coat you were wearing, so that you would always have it with you. This story is our story. We wander through the world, seeking peace, seeking happiness, seeking a solution to our suffering in external achievements, relationships, and experiences. We endure so much stress and struggle in this outer search. The spiritual path is the wise friend who finally tells us to stop searching outside and to look within. It is the realization that the peace we have been desperately seeking has been with us all along, sewn into the very fabric of our own being, waiting patiently in the quiet of the present moment for us to simply turn our attention inward and discover it. Therefore, after all the maps, all the philosophies, all the techniques, the final instruction is the simplest of all. Be here. The entire purpose of the Eightfold Path is to give us the skill, the stability, and the wisdom to do just that. Be here now. Attend to the sensation of this one breath. Notice the feeling of your feet on the floor. Hear the sound of the birds outside your window. Feel the warmth of the sun on your skin. This is it. This is the destination. This is the gateless gate. There is nothing to achieve, nowhere else to go, and no one else you need to be. You have already arrived. We began this journey together in a room lit by the cool blue light of a screen, feeling the quiet hum of dissatisfaction that runs beneath the surface of our modern lives. We started with the diagnosis of a universal fever, the disease of dukkha, and we identified its source as the relentless internal thirst of tanha. From there, we were offered a physician's prescription, the timeless and practical framework of the Four Noble Truths, which laid out a path to healing. Step by step, we walked that eightfold path together, learning to cultivate wisdom in our view, integrity in our actions, and a profound stillness in our minds. We journeyed through the core truths of existence, learning to ride the waves of impermanence, to let go of the heavy burden of a fictitious self, and to feel our deep, luminous interconnection with all of life. We have traveled from the recognition of our suffering to the very source of our liberation. And now, at the end of this journey, we arrive at the most essential and enduring message. Peace is not a destination. It is not a secret island free from the storms of life. The storms will always come. The winds of change will blow. The waves of gain and loss, praise and blame, joy and sorrow will rise and fall. The practice we have explored together is not a method for calming the ocean. It is the art of learning how to drop a silent anchor. Deep within your own being, there is a place of profound stillness, a depth that is untouched by the turbulence on the surface. This is the anchor of your own mindful, loving awareness. The practice is simply to learn how to let it fall, to let it rest in the quiet depths, holding you steady and secure as the inevitable storms of life pass by. You do not need to change the world outside. You only need to cultivate this anchor within. The tools for this work are now in your hands. The path has been illuminated. But these teachings are not meant to be collected as beautiful ideas. They are meant to be lived. The true journey begins now, in the laboratory of your own life, with your very next breath. It does not require you to become someone else, but rather to become more fully and compassionately who you already are. The peace you have been searching for is not in a future achievement or a distant memory. It is not in any book or any teaching. It has been here all along, waiting patiently in the quiet sanctuary of the present moment. It is as close as the feeling of your own breath, as intimate as the beating of your own heart. May you trust in this peace. May you return to it often, and may you, through your own gentle and persistent practice, discover the boundless freedom that is your truest nature.